Chapter 407. This little eunuch was indeed the personal eunuch of Prince Cheng. Prince Cheng. She raised her head and looked at Prince Cheng pitifully with a slightly red face. Duke Yong's mansion is my maternal family. Although she said it vaguely, many people immediately understood the meaning of her words. Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yuru in the crowd with a slight smile on her lips like a blooming ice flower. Sure enough, Qin Yuru was not satisfied with Di Yan and wanted to climb the social ladder here. Now she even said such words, which meant that Prince Cheng misunderstood her. The relationship between her and Duke Yong's mansion was only that of her maternal family. It was not like others said that the two families were going to marry again. Prince Cheng frowned fiercely and his eyes fell on Qin Yuru. How could he not understand the meaning of Qin Yuru's words? If Qin Yuru's reputation was not so bad, he would actually accept her. Since he had to take a concubine now, it was not a problem to have one more woman in his backyard. Moreover, she had Qin Huayong behind her. But this woman's reputation was really bad. Moreover, this woman's behavior was really a little slutty. Prince Shou also understood and suddenly burst into laughter. Uncle Wang, just admit it. Just now, Miss Qin treated you very well. When he said this, he did not finish his words. He stopped here and deliberately winked at Prince Cheng, which was more imaginative than saying all the words. Many young madams present looked at Qin Yuru with jealousy and secretly scolded her for being a bitch. They did not know what means she had used to hook up with Prince Cheng. It seemed that there was really something between them. First, Miss Qin is not engaged. Didn't I hear that she has been engaged to the heir of Duke Yong? A young madam could not bear it and pretended to ask other young madams around her in a low voice. She should be engaged. When I heard about Ning Kaisian, I seemed to hear that she was engaged. It seems that Duke Yong's mansion also sent her a gift. Several other young madams, who were still angry, spoke one after another, ignoring Qin Yuru's alternating red and pale face. Qin Yuru secretly hated that they came so fast that she was overwhelmed. But she also knew that she could not let them continue talking at this time. She looked up at the opposite crowd and suddenly her eyes lit up. She hurriedly raised her voice and said to Qin Wanru, who was behind the crowd, "Second sister." Ruyan Great Elder's face darkened. Qin Wanru did not want to get involved in this farce, but she knew that Qin Yuru had dragged her into it. Since this was the case, it was not convenient for her to hide. Qin Wanru, who walked out of the crowd, called out generously, "Big sister." His attitude was neither close nor distant. Although he was young, he was calm. Prince Cheng's eyes fell on her. When he saw her slender figure, he frowned. The reason why he paid attention to her was that Jian Master had said that this second Miss Qin was a good candidate to be his concubine. However, the girl in front of him was too young. Even if she looked delicate, he could not have any romantic thoughts. Besides, he had never thought about this kind of thing before. "Where did you go, second sister? Why did you disappear when I was walking? When I came back to find you, I got lost. I don't know how I bumped into you here and even offended Prince Cheng," Qin Yuru said softly. The moment she saw Qin Wanru, she knew that she had found a reason. "Wasn't I behind big sister? I followed her footsteps, but I didn't see her later. I thought she went to the flower hall, so I followed other young madams to the flower hall. But I didn't see her," Qin Wanru said lightly with a pair of watery eyes under her long eyelashes. It could be seen that the relationship between the two sisters was not very good. Moreover, the two sisters came to Prince Cheng's mansion together. The elder sister walked quickly in front and soon left the younger sister behind. Then the younger sister followed the crowd to the flower hall, but no one knew where the elder sister went. Now she said that she went back to find Qin Wanru. Since there were so many young madams going to the flower hall, if they went back to find Qin Wanru, they would be on the same road. How could they come here randomly? Since second Miss Qin was behind first Miss Qin, why didn't first Miss Qin go to the back to find Qin Wanru? Why did first Miss Qin go to the side to find Qin Wanru? Rui, and great elder princess said with a faint smile. Of course, she could tell that Qin Yuru wanted to drag Qin Wanru into trouble. Qin Wanru dared to do such a thing in front of her. It could be seen that this kind of thing had been done many times in Qin's mansion. Thinking that her fatherless granddaughter was treated unfairly in the past, Rui, and great elder princess's eyes flashed a trace of disgust. I really got lost. If it was only Qin Wanru, Qin Yuru had already thought of a reason to refute. But now there was the problem of great elder princess, which was so simple and clear. Qin Yuru didn't dare to answer at the moment. She raised her watery eyes and looked at Prince Cheng, asking him for help with her eyes. Big sister, why is one of your earrings missing? Where did it go? Qin Wanru didn't wait for Prince Cheng to speak. Her eyes fell directly on Qin Yuru's earlobe, where one of the earrings was missing. But, maybe it fell off before. Qin Yuru didn't expect Qin Wanru's eyes to be so sharp. She hurriedly explained in a panic. Let me accompany you to find it. Qin Wanru withdrew her eyes and said. How could the personal item of an aristocratic family's miss be lost casually? If a man took it, his reputation would be ruined. Qin Wanru's words were very appropriate. Although she didn't show much affection, she attached great importance to this matter. Several mature young madams nodded repeatedly. In this case, it was natural to find the earrings first. Otherwise, something might really go wrong. Prince Zhou looked at Qin Yuru doubtfully and then looked back at the little eunuch he sent out. At that time, only this little eunuch went to contact Qin Yuru. The little eunuch winked at him and took out a handkerchief from his arms. The handkerchief was slightly bulging. Although it looked smooth, Prince Zhou still found something different. This handkerchief was the spare handkerchief he put beside the little eunuch. He reached out and pinched the folded handkerchief. He felt there was something in the handkerchief. It was a little round and a little long. He looked up at the earrings on Qin Yuru's ears and his face changed slightly. Could it be that the first Miss Qin dared to give him the earrings privately at that time? It couldn't be. She should have regarded his little eunuch as Prince Cheng, so she secretly gave Prince Cheng a token. Thinking of this, Prince Zhou was relieved. There were many beautiful women. He didn't want the one in front of him at all. If she depended on him, it would be troublesome. Uncle Wang, here. Prince Zhou walked to Prince Cheng with a smile and handed the handkerchief in his hand together with the earrings wrapped inside to Prince Cheng's hand. Prince Cheng subconsciously reached out to take it. When he took it in his hand, his face changed slightly. He reacted quickly and immediately figured out the cause and effect of this matter. His eyes were full of disgust. He actually stuffed the earrings into the hands of the little eunuch sent by Chu Liuzhou. He thought that the little eunuch was his little eunuch and intended to give the earrings to him privately. He was not willing to be associated with the first Miss Qin who had a bad reputation at all. Come on, help first Miss Qin find the earrings. Prince Cheng calmly handed the handkerchief in his hand to Shiqi who stood behind him. Shiqi took it and pinched it in his hand. His face was full of astonishment. He also understood, but didn't know what his master meant. Prince Cheng looked at Qin Yuru sideways and shook his head slightly. Shiqi immediately understood and asked the other little eunuchs around him to look for the earrings along the way. Big sister, where did you go before? Let's go and have a look. The series of movements here didn't escape Qin Wanru, but she just said to Qin Yuru as if she didn't see it. Okay, it's over there. Knowing that she had to lead the way today, Qin Yuru was flustered and reached out to point randomly. The earrings were an excuse for her to meet Prince Cheng privately in the future. It was also a reason for her to meet Prince Cheng. She believed that as long as Prince Cheng talked to her nicely, he would definitely like her. However, she didn't expect that the current situation would happen. It was Qin Wanru again. Originally, she wanted to use her to divert people's attention, but she didn't expect that things would get worse. She secretly gritted her teeth, but had to point out the direction. Many people felt that there was something fishy here. The direction that Qin Yuru pointed out was the direction where the two princes came from. Needless to say, she really went to hook up with Prince Cheng. Send a few more people to help look for it. Rui, and great elder princess, ordered the old maid beside her. The old maid also sent a few servant girls and old maids over. Big sister, let's look for it ourselves. Seeing that Qin Yuru didn't move, Qin Wanru said with a smile. Okay, let's go. Qin Yuru had to agree. Found it, found it. Someone suddenly shouted. Qin Yuru's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She looked at Prince Cheng subconsciously, only to see him standing there calmly and looking at a little eunuch who ran over. She immediately panicked and inexplicably felt that something was wrong. A little eunuch who ran over with the earrings panted and reported, "Your Highness, I found it. It's under the tree over there." The little eunuch reached out and pointed at it casually. Qin Yuru's face stiffened. She bit her lips and almost fell down. She had tried her best to send the earrings to Prince Cheng. Could it be that Prince Cheng didn't want them, so he sent her earrings back? Then what did he mean when he asked the little eunuch to show his attention to her? She raised her head and looked at Prince Cheng with tears in her eyes. She was on the verge of collapsing. No matter how she looked at it, she felt that there was something wrong. Moreover, it was about the relationship between Prince Cheng and Qin Yuru. The noisy scene immediately became quiet because of Qin Yuru's behavior. Everyone's eyes turned from Qin Yuru's face to Prince Cheng's face. Waiting silently. What Prince Cheng said. Chapter 408. Prince Cheng calmly turned back and looked at Qin Yuru's tearful expression as if he didn't understand it at all. He took a step back and looked at Prince Shou. Prince Shou, it was your little eunuch who went down to ask about this Mississippi. Could it be that she lost her earring? Originally, Prince Cheng didn't want to get Prince Shou involved in this matter. When Prince Shou handed him the handkerchief, he took it, which could be regarded as taking over this matter. But now Qin Yuru's appearance made him have to tell the truth. He had kept a low profile for so many years, and now he was forced to get married. He didn't want Qin Yuru to ruin his plan. How do I know about her? At that time, she kept wandering around Uncle just to attract Uncle's attention. So I sent someone down to ask about her. I don't know where her earring is. Prince Shou was stunned by Prince Cheng's words, but he immediately became serious and said unhappily. Since Prince Cheng pushed this matter to him, he couldn't really accept it. Prince Shou's marriage had not been decided. If Qin Yuru blamed him at this time, it would also damage his reputation. So he said unceremoniously at the moment. After they spoke, they immediately presented the whole thing that Qin Yuru did at that time in front of everyone. Several misses originally looked at Qin Yuru with jealousy. At this time, when they saw that the two princes were afraid of Qin Yuru being involved, they couldn't help but be overjoyed. They covered their faces with handkerchiefs and sneered in a low voice. Qin Yuru's face turned blue and then purple. She only felt ashamed and resentful. She didn't expect that it was Prince Cheng who told the truth. Tears fell down immediately. Then she covered her face and ran out, crying bitterly. Rui, and great elder princess, gestured to an old maid beside her. The old maid nodded and followed her. Although she hated Qin Yuru very much, she was half the master of Qin Yuru now. She couldn't let Qin Yuru have an accident here. Mei Shui, take the earring and go to see big sister. Qin Wanru calmly ordered Mei Shui, who was stunned there. Mei Shui really didn't know how to deal with such a big change. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, she immediately snatched the earring from the little eunuch's hand, shouted, "Miss," and chased after them. Great elder princess, I also want to see big sister. Qin Wanru said to Rui, and great elder princess respectfully. In fact, great elder princess did not want Qin Wanru to leave. It was not easy for her to see her granddaughter. However, under the current situation, she knew that Qin Wanru should go and see her granddaughter. Even though they did not get along well, she still had to comfort Qin Yuru at this time. Second Miss Qin, please go ahead. There is a place for the womenfolk to rest in the mansion. Second Miss Qin, you can take the first miss there later. Rui and Great Elder Princess said. Thank you, Great Elder Princess. Qin Wanru bowed sideways again, and then hurriedly left in the direction where Qin Yuru left with Yujie. It was not a good thing to stay here. Since Qin Wanru had such a chance to leave Prince Cheng who had bad intentions, she would naturally leave as soon as possible. She did not want to get involved in the farce of Prince Cheng's mansion. Qin Yuru thought that she had won Prince Cheng's heart and attracted his attention. However, she did not know that Prince Cheng and Prince Zhou both shirked their responsibilities by accident and even exposed her. Qin Wanru clearly saw that Prince Zhou gave the handkerchief to Prince Cheng and Prince Cheng gave it to the eunuch behind him. Qin Yuru thought that she had schemed against Prince Cheng, but she did not expect that Prince Cheng was not a man who had tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex. He actually pushed her out mercilessly. As for Prince Zhou, who had wanted to watch the fun, he did not have any imagination about Qin Yuru and directly exposed Qin Yuru's true colors. When Qin Wanru found Qin Yuru, she was sitting in a corridor, lying on her stomach and crying. Mei Shui was beside her, trying to comfort her. Qin Wanru walked over slowly and sat down in the corridor. She did not go to comfort Qin Yuru and just leaned against the railing to enjoy the scenery. Although the leaves were withered and there was nothing to enjoy, at least there were corridors and eaves for her to enjoy. Qin Wanru, are you satisfied this time? You made me like this. You are so vicious. Qin Yuru wiped her tears and scolded Qin Wanru viciously. I don't know what you are talking about. Qin Wanru withdrew her gaze from the outside, smiled slightly and said very calmly. You don't know. How dare you say you don't know? If you did not say that I lost my earring, Prince Cheng and Prince Zhou would not have humiliated me. Qin Yuru was so angry that she almost sat up and wanted to give Qin Wanru 2 slaps. Mei Shui saw that it was not good and hurriedly pulled her sleeves, indicating that she should not be impulsive. Big sister lost your earring. Shouldn't you find it back? Or let it fall in Prince Cheng's mansion? Qin Wanru said indifferently. Qin Wanru, you did it on purpose, didn't you? Qin Yuru was so angry that she wiped her tears and stared at Qin Wanru viciously. If you think so, you are not wrong. Qin Wanru smiled slightly, raised her eyebrows, and said indifferently, do you want me to take care of this for you? Qin Yuru did not expect that Qin Wanru dared to say so and did not buy her words at all. She was ashamed and angry at the moment and only wanted to tear Qin Wanru into pieces. Qin Wanru stood up and her eyes became colder. Let's go back now. Qin Wanru, what do you mean? Nothing. I just think that you still want to stay in this state. Shouldn't you think about how to explain to Duke Yong's mansion now? Qin Wanru said indifferently. There were many young madams in the meeting today and Qin Yuru's matter was now exposed. She was engaged to Prince Cheng, but she still seduced Prince Cheng and was finally despised by him. If this matter was passed to Di Yan, it would not be a trivial matter. Qin Yuru had thought that she would succeed before, but now she suddenly found that she had failed and that she could not explain to Di Yan. She panicked for a moment. She did not dare to think about Prince Cheng anymore, so she naturally could not give up on Di Yan. She had no time to quarrel with Qin Wanru, so she stood up and walked out. Qin Wanru told the old maid who was ordered by Rui and Great Elder Princess to chase after them and then left with Qin Yuru. They got on the carriage and Qin Yuru suddenly said, let's go to Duke Yong's mansion. She wanted to remedy it. Go back to Ning Yuan Army General's mansion first, and then take big sister to Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Wanru ordered indifferently. She was not in the mood to accompany Qin Yuru to Duke Yong's mansion to put on a show. Seeing that Qin Wanru disobeyed her, Qin Yuru glared at her. Qin Wanru leisurely leaned on the carriage and said lightly, Big sister, don't take me to Duke Yong's mansion. Whatever you want to say or do, don't involve me. I don't want to repeat the scene at that time. Since they were going to Duke Yong's mansion must ask Qin Wanru. Qin Yuru had not figured out how to smooth things over, so she certainly did not want Qin Wanru to follow her to make trouble. Go to General's mansion first. Qin Yuru could only stare at Qin Wanru and said. The carriage went all the way. When they arrived at Ningyuan Army General's mansion, Qin Wanru got off the carriage. Qin Yuru immediately asked the coachman to change the direction and drove directly to Duke Yong's mansion. At this time, she was really panicked and confused, so she was not in the mood to quarrel with Qin Wanru. She had to explain this matter clearly before the news of Prince Cheng's mansion spread out. Qin Wanru stood at the gate and watched Qin Yuru's carriage leave. A trace of darkness slowly appeared in her eyes. Qin Yuru was really panicked this time. That was good. The more panicked she was, the more she wanted to do something. Foster daughter. Foster granddaughter. They were not close relatives. What Qin Yuru wanted was probably not the word righteousness, but the word do. Well, she did not like it either. Duke Xing's mansion owed her more than a foster daughter, or a foster granddaughter. After entering the mansion, Qin Wanru first went to greet Madame Dowager. Seeing Qin Wanru come back at this time, Madame Dowager was stunned and hurriedly let Qin Wanru in. When Qin Wanru entered the mansion, she was surprised to see Qin Huayong was also there. She hurriedly went forward and bowed to Madame Dowager and Qin Huayong. Shouldn't you and your big sister be in Prince Cheng's mansion at this time? Madame Dowager asked in surprise. Something happened. Big sister is now in Duke Yong's mansion. Qin Wanru said vaguely. What happened? Madame Dowager was shocked. Recently, Qin Yuru had been in trouble frequently. How could I not worry about her? This time, Qin Wanru did not hide anything and told him the cause and effect. When she finished, Qin Huayong already pounded the table angrily, stood up and strode out. Grandma, father, this. Qin Wanru was also shocked. Looking at the direction where Qin Huayong left, she said hesitantly. What a sin. What a sin. Madame Dowager was also so angry that her face turned pale and she almost couldn't breathe. This kind of thing was simply unheard of. No one thought that Qin Yuru would do such a thing. She had picked Di Yan out of thousands of people before. How could she fall in love with another man in such a short time? Moreover, this man was Prince Cheng. Now that she was exposed in public, even if Duke Yong's mansion wanted to break off the engagement, it would be justifiable. Grandma, what should we do now? Qin Wanru came over and gently patted Madame Dowager's back to calm her down. It depends on Duke Yong's mansion. If they really want to break off the engagement, let them do it. Madame Dowager sighed and said helplessly. Will Duke Yong's mansion break off the engagement? They are Madame Di's maiden family. Even if Duke Yong's mansion can tolerate this kind of thing, Child Di can't. Your father should have gone to Duke Yong's mansion now. Just wait for the result of their discussion. Madame Dowager said helplessly. She had lived for so long, but she had never heard of anyone who could be so shameless. Now Qin Yuru actually did such a thing. How could she say anything? After all, Qin Yuru had the word Qin on her head. Chapter 409. What? How could there be such a thing? They are going too far. Hearing Qin Yuru's words, old Madame of Duke Yong was so angry that her face turned livid. She only felt that her chest was stuffy. After forcing herself to say such a sentence, she was on the verge of collapsing. The servant girls and old maids on both sides saw that the situation was not good. They hurried over to support her and shouted anxiously, Old Madam! Old Madam! What happened? Countess Yong walked in with a frown. Madam, it's bad. Old Madam is going to faint. An old maid hurriedly turned around and reported. Hearing that something happened to Old Madam, Countess Yong hurried over to help others and called Old Madam, who was so angry that she almost fainted, back. When she woke up, she felt weak all over. Her lips trembled and she wanted to say something, but she found that the words were stuck in her throat and she could not say a word. Mother, don't worry. Let me ask her. Seeing old Madame's look, Countess Yong knew that the situation was not good, so she hurriedly comforted her. At this time, old Madame only felt that her heart was burning, but she could not say a word. She could only nod hard. Since the matter was so serious, Countess Yong must know it. Auntie, please save me. Help me. Qin Yuru cried and rushed to Countess Yong. She knelt down with a plop sound and put her hands on Countess Yong's knees. Her tears fell down. Yuru, what happened? Countess Yong had a bad feeling and her face turned slightly pale. Aunt, Prince Chang's mansion sent an invitation card to our mansion. My sister and I went to Prince Chang's mansion together. On the way, we were enjoying the scenery, so we turned into the garden. Later, we lost an earring in the garden. When we came out, we found that the earring was missing. Coincidentally, we met Prince Chang and Prince Zhou visiting Rui and Great Elder Princess together. They heard that my earring was missing, so they helped me find it, but, speaking of this, Qin Yuru choked with sobs. Her tears rolled down, and it seemed that she could not even say a word. What's wrong? Countess Yong snapped. Those young madams who attended the meeting said that I deliberately leaned towards Prince Cheng and Prince Zhou. At that time, Prince Cheng and Prince Zhou happened to be in the garden, so they said that I deliberately. Aunt, my cousin, and I have been engaged. How could I be so shameless to do such a thing? But everyone's mouth can melt gold. Aunt, how can I live now? As Qin Yuru spoke, she cried even more sadly. She took a few steps on her knees and leaned close to Countess Yong's legs. They all misunderstood you. Countess Yong asked coldly. Aunt, what should we do? What should we do? I didn't know the place, so I just walked around. Who knew I would get into trouble like this? Bring it here. If I had known this earlier, I wouldn't have gone to Prince Cheng's mansion. Qin Yuru burst into tears. In fact, she also wanted to push the blame onto Qin Wanru, but almost everyone knew that her relationship with Qin Wanru was not good now. She could not say that she went to the garden to find Qin Wanru, nor could she say that it was Qin Wanru who led her to the garden. Qin Wanru's schedule should be very easy to check. She was with those young madams and followed the crowd to the flower hall. There were many people who could testify for Qin Wanru. Even if she wanted to shift the blame to Qin Wanru, she could not. She could not take Qin Wanru as a scapegoat. Qin Yuru could only say that she was innocent, so that people in Duke Yong's mansion would believe that she was innocent before the rumors spread. Think of a way to correct Yuru's name. At this time, old Madam of Duke Yong finally recovered and said angrily, they are bullying Yuru because she just came to the capital city and has no background. How could they make such a simple thing sound like this? Yuru has been engaged to our mansion, so how could she have other ideas? In order to show her face in front of Prince Cheng, these young madams really dare to say anything. They don't even know the rules of unmarried women. How could they dream of becoming Prince Cheng's wife? This time, Duke Yong's mansion did not accept the invitation card, but they did not care. Not all aristocratic families received the invitation card, which meant that they were not included in the scope of Prince Cheng's concubine selection. The scope was not based on the level of official position. It was the arrangement of the imperial palace who got the invitation card and who didn't. Those who got the invitation card were not necessarily happy. In the hearts of some people who wanted power, they were not willing to go. After all, in addition to Prince Cheng, there were other princes who should also choose concubines. Compared with Prince Cheng, those princes had much more momentum. At least, they had a much better future than Prince Cheng, who seemed to be an idle prince for the rest of his life. That was what Duke Yong's mansion thought. They were very happy that they did not get the invitation card. But at this time, old Madam hated that her mansion did not get the invitation card. Otherwise, with Duke Yong's mansion, she did not believe that anyone would bully her granddaughter like this. They all think so. Ruyan Great Elder Princess also thinks so. After thinking for a while, Countess Yong did not directly answer old madam's words. She was not old madam, so she did not have such a preference for Qin Yuru. She even did not want Qin Yuru to be her daughter-in-law at the very beginning. But with Qin Huayong's entry, she had to do it. Aunt, I don't know. I don't know. They all scolded me, so I left in tears. I don't know whether Ruyan Great Elder Princess believed them or not. Qin Yuru said while wiping her tears. She also knew that Countess Yong was more difficult to fool than old madam. While crying, she secretly observed Countess Yong's expression and felt anxious. She didn't dare to say that Ruyan Great Elder Princess must think so. Wouldn't her lie be exposed? But she did not dare to say that Ruyan Great Elder Princess was against it. When this kind of thing spread out, people would know that although Ruyan Great Elder Princess did not say anything, she should agree with it. Fortunately, Ruyan Great Elder Princess was very noble, so it was impossible for Countess Yong to ask her directly. She just said it vaguely. Yuru, do you know that it is Prince Cheng's consort selection this time? Countess Yong was not so easy to be deceived. Yuru, I don't know. How could I know this kind of thing? In the mansion. Mother is in such a situation, and I live in Mother's place. Every day, I see Mother's miserable look. How could I have other thoughts? Moreover, there is no well-informed person around me. How could I know anything? I just took the invitation card and went out with my second sister to attend the banquet. Qin Yuru answered while crying. Her snow-white face was full of tears, and her eyes were red and swollen. She looked very pitiful. How could Yuru know that Prince Cheng is going to select a consort? She is in such a situation in the mansion now. How could she know what happened outside the mansion? Only aristocratic families like us know that Prince Cheng is going to select a consort. She is just a little girl, and there is no elder to make decisions for her. How could she know? Yuru, my poor granddaughter. Seeing Qin Yuru's pitiful look, old madam was about to cry. She thought of her daughter who was still lying on the bed, and then looked at her granddaughter who was bullied and cried on the ground. Countess Yong frowned and felt that something was wrong, but she couldn't figure out what it was. She frowned tightly and stared at Qin Yuru with sharp eyes, which made Qin Yuru panic. She couldn't make any other reaction at the moment, so she could only cover her face with a handkerchief and cry hard. Yuru, you really don't know about Prince Cheng's consort selection? Countess Yong asked again. Yuru didn't know before. Qin Yuru did not dare to say it clearly. When did you know? Countess Yong continued to ask. After I found the earrings, I guessed it from the words of those misses. Qin Yuru cried more and more grievances. Aunt, I really don't know anything. After I came to the capital city, I only attended a few banquets. You know, how could I know that there are so many things in an ordinary banquet? If I had known that there were so many things, I would not have attended. She cried pitifully and spoke very sincerely. Countess Yong thought that it was not long since she came to the capital city. When she temporarily lived in their mansion, she basically did not go out. After Qin's mansion moved to the capital city, they did not attend many banquets. Therefore, they were not clear about some things in the capital city. Thinking about it in this way, it made sense. Countess Yong's face was a little pale. In this case, it was hard to explain. Qin Yuru's bad reputation was also a hindrance to the reputation of their mansion. Di Yan was going to inherit the position of Duke Yong, and Qin Yuru was the future Countess Yong. She had not married into the mansion, but she had already caused such gossip, and it was also related to Prince Cheng. At this time, Countess Yong even regretted it. If she had known that this would happen, she would have arranged Di Yan's marriage earlier. Qin Yuru would not have a chance to be involved. Now, even if Qin Yuru did something disgraceful, it had nothing to do with their mansion. Think of a way to stop those people from talking nonsense. Old Madam of Duke Yong said angrily. Old Madam, how to say it? We were not there at that time. Countess Yong spread her hands helplessly and said. In any case, we can't let Yuru suffer such a great grievance. This child is pitiful enough. Father doesn't care about her, and mother is like this. If we don't help her, how can she live? Old Madam of Duke Yong said sternly with red eyes. She turned to look at Qin Yuru with pity. She really felt sorry for her granddaughter. Why should she be pitiful? She brought this upon herself. All of a sudden, a loud shout came from the door. A few curtains were pulled down, and the pearls were pulled apart. They rolled on the floor. Di Yan, who was livid, rushed in angrily. He walked over and grabbed Qin Yuru, dragging her out as he shouted at the top of his lungs. Chapter 410. Qin Yuru did not expect that Di Yan would suddenly rush in and pull her out in front of so many people. When she came to herself, she was pulled to the door. She stretched out her hands and held the door frame tightly. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Cousin, they really misunderstood me. They thought that I had feelings for Prince Cheng, but I am engaged." How could I? After saying that, she burst into tears as if what she said was true. You're rebelling. You're rebelling. Pull her back. Old Madam was also shocked by Di Yan's rude action. At this time, she came to herself and slammed the table loudly. Immediately, several maids and old maids helped to pull Qin Yuru back, and someone went up to pry Di Yan's hands away. Countess Yong also stood up angrily and shouted, Yan, what are you doing? Di Yan's hands were pulled away by an old maid. He looked blankly at Qin Yuru, who was crying on the ground, and his eyes also turned red. He strode in and said to Countess Yong, Mother, I don't want to marry this bitch. Slap. The heavy slap stunned everyone in the room. Di Yan stared blankly at old Madam, who had always doted on him the most. For a moment, tears almost fell from his eyes. He managed to suppress the bitterness in his heart and said word by word, Grandmother, is it true that only she and aunt are your relatives, while my father, mother, and I are not? Old Madam's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Your cousin is also a victim. Old Madam was also stunned. She looked at her hands and trembled slightly. She had always doted on Di Yan, who was the future heir of Duke Yong's mansion. Naturally, he could not be compared with her other grandchildren. But just now, she actually slapped her favorite grandson. Grandmother, why must I marry this bitch? Do you want to disregard the reputation of Duke Yong's mansion for 100 years? She has bad intentions, but she repeatedly implicates others. She was like this in the past, and she is still like this now. Now, people in the capital city will say that she is not a good woman. She has an engagement, but she still seduces Prince Cheng. Grandmother, how can I face others? Di Yan said angrily. He knew that it was actually an accident. A miss who went to Prince Cheng's mansion happened to fall and had to leave early. The one who went to pick her up happened to be her brother. On the way back, the miss told her brother about the interesting thing that happened in Prince Cheng's mansion today. After sending his sister home, this brother, who was also a good friend of Di Yan, told Di Yan about it. After hearing the cause and effect, Di Yan couldn't bear it anymore. He angrily went to find his mother, only to hear that his mother had already moved to Old Madam's place. When he arrived at Old Madam's place, he found that Qin Yuru was actually there. Not only was she there, but she also expressed so much innocence. Immediately, he had the guts to pull Qin Yuru out. Yan, this is not true. Old Madam tried to calm herself down. What do you mean it's not true? It's true. Grandma, I'll say it here today. I want to break off the engagement. I don't want to marry such a woman. If you force me again, I'll leave this family. Di Yan straightened his neck and said angrily. After that, he turned around and was about to leave. Come on, catch this evil creature. Countess Yong saw that the situation was not good and shouted hurriedly. Several old maids at the door immediately stood in front of Di Yan and did not let him leave. However, Di Yan was determined to leave this time. He forcefully pushed away several old maids and was about to leave. Several old maids pulled him and did not let him go. For a moment, the door was pulled back and forth. There were more and more beads hanging on the door. Di Yan stepped on a bead and almost fell down. This made him even more fierce. He suddenly shook off an old maid's hand and kicked another old maid. He was about to rush out of the door. He stopped helplessly when he saw Qin Huayong standing outside the door. Compared to the hostility on Qin Huayong's face, Di Yan's temper immediately subsided. When he was in Qin's mansion, Qin Huayong had trained him a lot. As soon as he saw Qin Huayong, he immediately felt his legs turn to jelly and his temper subsided. When Qin Huayong saw him, he did not say a word. He reached out and grabbed Di Yan's collar, directly pulled him in, and fiercely pushed him forward. Di Yan stumbled back a few steps and hit a table behind him heavily. He immediately bent over in pain. Countess Yong, who was beside him, hurriedly reached out to hold him and glared at Qin Huayong. If it were not for the dignity of a madam from an aristocratic family, she would have cursed him out loud at this moment. Qin Huayong strode in, bowed to old madam sitting in the first seat, and then to Countess Yong with a gloomy face. Then he raised his head and said, "Old madam and madam, please ask the servants to leave." He meant that he had something to discuss with them. Old madam was at a loss. When she saw Qin Huayong, she breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly waved her hand. All the servant girls and old maids left. Countess Yong did not want to agree, but when she saw her mother-in-law had asked the servants to leave, she thought for a while and could only wave her hand. The servants who followed her also left. "You two go out first," Qin Huayong said to Qin Yuru and Di Yan with fierce eyes. They did not dare to say anything more. Qin Yuru wiped away her tears, stood up, and retreated to the door. She looked at Di Yan, who left with her to transport the coal. She called out timidly with tears in her eyes, "Cousin." This degree of gentleness was exactly the same as when she accompanied Xiaoxin in Duke Yong's mansion, but now it did not work. Di Yan, who had heard about what she did in Prince Cheng's mansion, hated her so much that he would not care about her kindness. He snorted coldly, turned around, and strode to the courtyard under the corridor, as if she was trash. Looking at Di Yan who was far away, Qin Yuru became more and more anxious. Why did father come at this time? Did Qin Wanru complain to father? It should be okay. After all, she was father's only daughter. But these were not enough. She had to strengthen her power. By the way, Duke Xing's mansion. With Duke Xing's mansion, even if she did something wrong, Duke Yong's mansion would not abandon her. Thinking of what Xiao Jia had said before, she gritted her teeth hard, nodded, and called Mei Shui. She whispered a few words, and Mei Shui answered and hurried to go out. When she lived in Duke Yong's mansion, she had done a favor to 1 or 2 servant girls. It was much more convenient for them to send letters and pass messages than in Qin's mansion. Coincidentally, she was going back to the mansion in a while. She could not wait. Originally, Xiao Jia had not fixed the time she had set with her. She only said that she would inform her the next time she went out. But this time, she did not know when she could come out again. She could not wait any longer. If she did not have Duke Xing's mansion as a bargaining chip, she was afraid that things would be terrible. Moreover, if she did this at this time, she could make up for her ruined reputation. Qin Yuru's mind was full of different ideas. The look on her face suddenly changed from anger to complacency, and then to maliciousness, which made Di Yan, who was standing in the yard, more and more disgusted. At this time, he regretted it. If he had known this, he would not have been so obsessed to agree to the marriage with his grandmother, and he would not have persuaded his mother. At this time, Di Yan even felt that it was better for Qin Yuru to die. At least, she would not ruin his reputation. He reached out and pressed his forehead, only to feel the blue veins on the fire fork between his eyebrows bulging. No, He absolutely could not give in today. He did not want to marry such a bitch. The two of them had their own thoughts and stood far away from each other. They were originally the closest fiancé, but now they were like the most disgusting people. When their eyes occasionally met, Di Yan could not hide the strong disgust in his eyes. At first, Qin Yuru looked timid, but then her eyes became sharp. She even raised her head and looked at Di Yan proudly. As long as she became the granddaughter of Duke Xing's mansion, Di Yan might not necessarily be her only choice. But at this time, she could only choose him. No matter whether he was willing or not, she had to make him accept this marriage. At this time, she could not break off the marriage. Finally, there was a sound in the room. Qin Huayong strode out and his eyes fell on Qin Yuru coldly. Qin Yuru could not help but shiver. Qin Huayong snorted at Qin Yuru, turned to walk in front of Di Yan, and said coldly, "Let's go, take me to see your father." "Yes, uncle-in-law." At this time, Di Yan also adjusted his mood. After taking a deep breath, he left with Qin Huayong. Countess Yong also walked to the door and looked at Qin Yuru through the broken bead curtain. Her eyes were fierce and disgusted, but then she tried hard to calm down the anger in her heart, reached out to lift the bead curtain, and waved to Qin Yuru in the corridor in a friendly manner. "Yuru, come here, your grandmother has something to say to you." Seeing Countess Yong's expression, Qin Yuru was overjoyed. She hurriedly put away the thoughts in her heart, walked over obediently, and then followed Countess Yong into the main room. In the main room, old madam was still sitting on the couch in the middle. Seeing Qin Yuru come in, she immediately waved to her. Qin Yuru hurriedly came over, took old madam's hand, and wanted to kneel down again, but old madam pulled her hard. "Yuru, don't cry. This is just a rumor, and your aunt and uncle will not believe it. From now on, stay in the mansion, don't go out, and take good care of your mother. Right and wrong are in people's hearts, and no matter what those who don't abide by the female discipline say, it is false." "Grandmother." Qin Yuru's tears fell down again. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief, turned to Countess Yong gratefully, and said, "Aunt. Okay, as long as our family doesn't believe it, it's okay. From now on, be good, and don't go out again." Countess Yong squeezed a smile on her face. Qin Yuru nodded gratefully, and for a moment, she choked with sobs. Old madam's eyes also turned red, and she reached out to touch her head. "Okay, don't cry. Since you have come to my home, this time you can leave after lunch." Chapter 411. It was very quiet in the pavilion, and only the sound of the cold wind came from outside the window. Inside the window, two people were playing chess. Shiqi and Xiao Xuanzi stood beside their masters and watched their masters play chess attentively. Although they were eunuchs, they knew a little about chess after following their masters. From time to time, they changed their expressions from tension to relaxation or from relaxation to tension according to the changes of the chess game. There was Buddhist incense burning in the room, and the faint smell of sandalwood was very calming. Prince Cheng was a Buddhist and liked to use good sandalwood in the room, which was a habit of his. Prince Zhou had already gone back, leaving Chu Luqian alone. Because he had just had a good rest, it was inconvenient for him to leave, so they played chess together. As for the hospitality, Prince Cheng specially asked Ruyan Great Elder Princess to make the decision. The so-called decision was different from the previous meaning. He personally asked her to make the decision. Ruyan Great Elder Princess came to entertain the guests for him before, just to entertain these misses. If he really wanted to choose, he would treat himself. But now he entrusted all of it to Ruyan Great Elder Princess, which meant that she could make the decision for him and help him choose some people. He was not interested in it at all. Ruyan Great Elder Princess was not willing to do it at first. She deliberately brought these misses to the garden to let Prince Ching choose himself. Unexpectedly, after what happened with Qin Yuru, Prince Ching actually entrusted all of it to her and let her make the decision, which made it difficult for Ruyan Great Elder Princess. She did come here to have a look, but she just wanted to have a look. How could she help Prince Cheng make the decision? Now Prince Cheng threw the matter to her impatiently. Thinking of what had happened just now, Ruyan Great Elder Princess also felt very tired. This first miss of Ningyuan Army General was really a weirdo. She was engaged, but how could she have the face to do this kind of thing? She was even more shameless than those unmarried misses who deliberately looked for opportunities to get close to princes and princes. Originally, Prince Cheng had no intention of marrying a wife. It was not easy for him to agree to marry a wife. Now, he was hit by this shameless first Miss Qin and seemed to be unwilling to pick a wife. Ruyan Great Elder Princess was also very helpless. Seeing that Prince Cheng insisted on doing this, he could only lead the large group of people back to the inner courtyard parlor. Prince Zhou felt that there was nothing to watch, so he left with his men. When Chu Luqin came over, he saw Prince Cheng quietly playing chess with him, so he sat opposite him and started to play chess. The two of them went back and forth, but it was very quiet. The chess game was in a stalemate, and it was difficult to determine the victor. Prince Cheng held a chess piece in his hand, and his eyes fell on the chessboard for a long time without saying anything. Seeing that he did not make a move for a long time, Chu Luqin picked up the teacup beside him and took a sip. Then he put it down slowly and asked casually, "Uncle, why don't you choose a miss from an aristocratic family? Great Elder Princess will help me with this matter." Prince Cheng said without raising his head. "Great Elder Princess must not have picked one that you like. Uncle, you won't entrust this matter to Great Elder Princess, will you?" Chu Luqin raised his eyes slightly and said with a faint smile. "It doesn't matter. It's just that there are a few more women in the mansion." Prince Cheng was still looking for a suitable place to place his chess piece, so he answered casually. "But this is Prince Cheng's wife. Uncle, can you really not care about it?" Chu Luqin said meaningfully. His words made Prince Cheng's hands stop. He raised his head and put the chess piece aside. He also picked up the tea at hand and took a sip. Then he frowned and said with a bitter smile, "I don't want to get married at all. If I marry someone, I will just be a burden to others. I'm afraid that I want to belong to Buddhism for the rest of my life." "Since you don't want to, why did you promise my uncle an imperial grandmother?" Chu Luqin asked with a puzzled look, with some elegant concern on his face. Prince Cheng's eyes fell on Chu Luqin's face. Seeing that he actually asked this question sincerely, the smile on his face became more and more bitter. "Since this matter is decided by my brother and mother, it's useless for me to oppose it. Actually, what's so good about women? Something happened today. An engaged woman actually barged in front of me and deliberately dropped an earring. If all the women in this world are like this, then how can this prince get married?" Prince Cheng sighed, as if he could not avoid it at all costs. What happened to Qin Yuru gave him inspiration. If it was inconvenient to refuse before and he had to compromise, now there was a new turning point because of Qin Yuru. The assassination on the night of New Year's Eve made him appear in the eyes of the emperor. At this time, he had to listen to the emperor and choose a wife. After that, he discussed with his aides about what kind of woman was the most suitable to marry into his mansion. But now he felt that with this incident, his dislike for women could be justified. It was reasonable that he did not want to get married. Therefore, he didn't want to care about anything and directly put all the blame on Rui, and Great Elder Princess. Originally, he showed that he did not like women and only wanted to join Buddhism. At this time, after being provoked by Qin Yuru, this idea was even more reasonable. It was a good reason to shirk the responsibility. Of course, it was not convenient for other women to enter his mansion. Maybe he would have a woman in the future, but not now. At this time, he did not want to attract others' attention. As the assassination became more and more serious, many things were out of his control. He had to come to this step, but at the moment, he could still change it. The daughter of Ningyuan Army General was really annoying, but at this time, it was a surprise for him. "Uncle, it was just an accident. There are not many women in this world who are as shameless as her." Chu Luchen comforted Prince Cheng with a smile. Before she showed it, who would have thought that she was shameless? All the women in this world are good at hiding. If she did not find it before, she might expose it later. If she found it after entering Prince Cheng's mansion, she would not be the only one who would be embarrassed. Prince Cheng shook his head and refused decisively. Uncle, are you going to tell my uncle like this? Chu Luchen smiled and said calmly. He had rested for a while. At this time, he looked good, but his complexion was a little lighter than that of ordinary people, which made him look a little colder than ordinary people. He was more like an immortal who did not enter the mortal world. This was indeed what Prince Cheng had always thought before. For this sick nephew, he had never despised him, but he also did not pay attention to him. However, Shichi said that Chu Luchen had a woman with him at that time, which made him feel like an immortal who had been dragged into the mortal world and become a libertine. There was a huge deviation here, and Prince Cheng still could not figure out what was going on. Later, Chu Luchen had an accident, which pulled him into the whirlpool. Whether it was intentional or unintentional, Prince Cheng still could not figure it out. After looking at Chu Luchen opposite him, Prince Cheng said slowly, I really have to tell my brother about this. If my brother agrees that I will not marry a princess, it will be the best. If my brother says that I must marry a princess, then I will marry her. In the end, he said this very helplessly, as if he had been really shocked and had no idea, but under the pressure of the emperor, he said, it is difficult for one who has seen the sea to be water. If I miss it, I will miss it. She said the last sentence in a very low voice, almost talking to herself, but Chu Luchen heard it clearly. With a trace of deepness in his eyes, he saw Prince Cheng put down a chess piece, and then he also put down a chess piece in his hand. He said, Imperial grandmother also wants me to get married. But I am in such a situation now. How can I get married? I am as embarrassed as uncle. Prince Cheng agreed with this in his heart. Chu Luchen didn't know how long he could live, so it was better not to marry a princess, so as not to hurt the princess. But of course, it was not convenient for him to say this in front of Chu Luchen. If he really said something wrong, the Empress Dowager would definitely punish him. At the moment, he smiled and comforted him, your illness is not incurable. Didn't my mother also invite many imperial physicians to treat you? You can take your time to recuperate. Take my time to recuperate. But of course, Imperial grandmother wants me to marry a princess as soon as possible. Chu Luchen put down another chess piece and said without raising his head. His eyes were still on the chess game, and he seemed to be extremely focused. Prince Cheng's heart moved, and he put down the chess piece in his hand, but his attention fell on Chu Luchen. The look on his face became more and more peaceful. Can you ask my mother to postpone it for a few years? You are still young. Imperial grandmother is very anxious, and I am also annoyed, but I also know that Imperial grandmother does it for me, but I am now. Chu Luchen shook his sleeves. Although he didn't continue, Prince Cheng understood the meaning of his words. It seemed that Chu Luchen's illness was not faking, and it seemed that he really didn't want to get married. Maybe he also felt annoyed and didn't have the energy to take care of a princess. He glanced at the wheelchair in which Chu Luchen was sitting calmly. He remembered that Chu Luchen didn't sit in a wheelchair much before, but now it seemed that he did it more often. But looking at Xiao Xuanzi's skillful movements, he knew that he had been doing it all the time. Chu Luchen's body was getting worse and worse. In fact, there is a way. Prince Cheng thought of something and suddenly suggested to Chu Luchen. Uncle, do you have any good ideas? Chu Luchen raised his eyelids lazily, as if he didn't believe that Prince Cheng had any good ideas. I do have a plan, but it depends on whether you want to use it or not. Prince Cheng smiled with a gentle and decent look, as if he really wanted to help Chu Luchen. Uncle, tell me about it. Seeing that Prince Cheng was so confident, Chu Luchen seemed to be a little energetic, smiled slightly, and asked. It seemed that he really didn't like to get married. Prince Cheng's somewhat suspicious eyes showed a trace of thoughtfulness. Then who was the girl that Shichi met before? Was her identity not high enough, Or was it really just an occasional show? Or was Chu Luchen like this in private? In the past, it was just the surface. If it was really like this, Chu Luchen was not as harmless as he looked. I helped you with an idea, so you have to help me with an idea. Prince Cheng was thinking a lot, but he didn't show it on his face and said with a smile. Okay, I will try my best. Chu Luchen looked at Prince Cheng with his deep eyes, seemed to put down the chess piece in his hand casually, and said with a smile. Chapter 412. Why don't you temporarily choose a younger miss? She is too young, so you can't get married right away. In this way, you can give an explanation to my mother. Seeing that there was no way to turn the situation around, Prince Cheng helplessly sat down again and said while picking up his chess pieces. It was Master Jia Yan who thought of this idea for him before. At this time, with a flash of inspiration, he directly gave this idea to Chu Luchen. This is also a good idea. But it is not easy to find such a person. I don't like those picky women in the capital city. Chu Luchen also picked up his chess piece. Hearing Prince Cheng's words, he knocked a chess piece in his hand on the table and said with a malicious look in his eyes. Prince Cheng certainly knew Chu Luchen's reaction. When Empress Dowager intended to choose a wife for him, he heard that those misses from aristocratic families who were present at that time all looked at other princes with affection. At this time, he even hated all the misses from aristocratic families in the capital city. If she is not a miss from an aristocratic family in the capital city, I'm afraid my mother will not agree. Prince Cheng reminded him with a smile. Empress Dowager doted on Chu Luchen so much. If she chose a wife for him, she must be of high status, and she must be a miss from a big aristocratic family. Anyway, I don't like those snobbish women in the capital city. Chu Luchen continued to pick up the chess pieces without lifting his hand and said lazily. Once again, he did not hesitate to repeat it, which showed that he really didn't like them. If she is not a miss from an aristocratic family, it is impossible. If you really don't like the previous ones, you can actually choose a miss from an aristocratic family who has just arrived in the capital city. After all, they have never appeared in the capital city before and have never been snobbish. Prince Cheng thought for a while and helped him to give an idea. Chu Luchen was hurt by those misses from aristocratic families in the capital city after the previous concubine selection. Then he could choose a miss who had just arrived in the capital city. At least at that time when Chu Luchen was choosing concubines, this person must not be present, so that Chu Luchen could untie the knot in his heart. If he could make friends with Chu Luchen, Prince Cheng would be very happy. Which one is suitable? Chu Luchen was very pleased with her words. He raised his pale face and asked with a smile. Prince Cheng was stunned by this question. In fact, he just said it casually. Hearing Chu Luchen's detailed question, he didn't think of anyone else for a moment. Suddenly, he thought of what he said before and immediately said with a smile, I heard that the second daughter of Ningyuan Army General is young but beautiful. Maybe you can consider it. In fact, when they were in the yard just now, Prince Cheng had seen Qin Wanru. However, at that time, his attention was focused on Qin Yuru and he did not notice Qin Wanru's appearance. The so-called outstanding appearance was just a casual remark without specific verification. This was also what Master Jia Yan had said before. King Cheng borrowed it temporarily. Ningyuan Army General. Chu Luchen repeated and frowned, as if he couldn't remember who it was. Ningyuan Army General Qin Huayong. Prince Cheng reminded him with a smile. Chu Luchen put down the chess piece in his hand, leaned back on his wide wheelchair, and said with some disgust, I do know her. I've known her since I was in Jiangzhou. She's just a little young girl. Being young has its advantages. Empress Dowager won't let you get married in a hurry. When she grows up and gets married, it will take many years. Moreover, she is young and has just arrived in the capital city. She must not be so snobbish. Prince Cheng said. He was not surprised that Chu Luchen knew Qin Wanru. At that time, Qin Wanru was involved in the incident at the gate of the palace. Many people who knew the real situation guessed that Chu Luchen and second Miss Qin knew each other. Now, hearing Chu Luchen admit it openly, they were more and more sure that Qin Wanru was really involved in the incident at that time. It seemed that Chu Luchen didn't really care about her. That's good. Well, that's settled. Chu Luchen nodded casually, as if he was going to eat something later. This casual attitude made Prince Ching stunned. He suddenly felt that this matter was too casual. He coughed in a low voice and tentatively asked, "Do you really think second Miss Qin is good?" "Since it's Uncle Wang's suggestion and I also know her, I've lived in their mansion when I was in Jiangzhou. She's quite well behaved. It doesn't matter if she's too small. At least, she can delay her marriage for a few more years. My imperial grandmother can also refuse it. She's indeed a good candidate." Chu Liuchen's words sounded very serious, but his eyes, which were full of smiles, did not look serious at all. After that, he raised the chess piece in his hand to Prince Cheng and said, "Uncle, I'll play first." After he put down the chess piece, he paid more attention to the problem than before. He even moved another position when Prince Cheng had not put down the chess piece. This kind of naughty look stunned Prince Cheng. He shook his head helplessly and put down the chess piece with a smile. After all, he didn't care about it. But since he had mentioned it, he should not have anything to do with second Miss Qin in the future. "Uncle, thank you for helping me think of a way. In fact, if you really don't want to marry a princess, you can also talk about what happened today." Chu Luchen also put down a chess piece. This time, he was very well behaved and no longer moved the chess piece. He shook his robe elegantly and said meaningfully, "What do you mean?" Prince Ching smiled. "Today, your consort selection was disturbed by a woman, which made you realize that there is such a hateful woman in this world. Originally, you didn't want to marry, and the reason why you agreed was also the intention of Empress Dowager and my uncle. But now that you have suffered a blow, you have a reason to say that you don't want to marry for the time being. Originally, Prince Ching didn't like women very much, so he didn't want to marry a princess. This time, he naturally had no other choice and couldn't withdraw even if he wanted to. If he made an excuse because of Qin Yuru, he could at least postpone it for a period of time. In fact, this was the original idea that Prince Cheng had made up." Hearing Chu Liuchen's words, he immediately showed a look of sudden enlightenment and nodded repeatedly. "Good, good, it is indeed a good idea. But..." Speaking of this, Prince Cheng hesitated again. "Uncle, do you still have any concerns? Do you really like this first Miss Qin and want to compete with the heir of Duke Yong's mansion for the beauty?" Chu Luchen raised his beautiful eyebrows and asked curiously. "How could it be possible? I am afraid of getting you into trouble. This first Miss Qin is the elder sister of second Miss Qin just now, and also the daughter of Ningyuan Army General." Prince Ching shook his head again and again, showing a look of politeness but not politeness. He stayed away from this first Miss Qin like a ghost. "It doesn't matter. It's just a matter of this prince choosing a young lady from an aristocratic family that I like and doesn't dislike. As long as Uncle Wang doesn't involve her when you talk about this matter, it'll be fine." Chu Luchen waved his hand indifferently and said. Hearing what he said, Prince Cheng understood and laughed. It seemed that Chu Luchen really didn't take this second Miss Qin seriously. Since it was he who helped Chu Luchen come up with this idea, in order to make friends with Chu Luchen, he couldn't ruin this matter. He had to find a chance to help Chu Luchen. If he could make Chu Luchen stand on his side, it would be of great benefit to him. Prince Ching didn't believe that his elder brother didn't have any helpers at that time. But his nephew was too weak, otherwise he would definitely pay more attention to him. If he could hold the helpers left by his elder brother in his hand, it would be much easier for him to do what he wanted. Prince Cheng had an ulterior motive. Of course, he tried to please his young nephew. Chu Luchen was just a weak teenager who had not experienced hardships and was not dangerous. Prince Cheng just needed to coax him. Although he knew that his nephew was a little temperamental, so what? What could he do with his poor health? Thinking of this, he became more and more patient. He must not go against Chu Liuchen's mind. He would never involve the second Miss Qin, whom he had just proposed, in order to show his sincerity to Chu Liuchen. As for the woman Shiqi saw before, it was probably Chu Liuchen's reverse psychology. The Empress Dowager and the Emperor didn't want him to marry a noble miss from an aristocratic family, so he just found a woman with a low status who couldn't be seen. Of course, his purpose was to go against the Empress Dowager and the Emperor. The reason for this speculation was entirely because of Chu Liuchen's words and behavior just now. That was how a teenager who was in the second year of high school was. Prince Ching felt that he also had such a period of time, but he was more sensible and it didn't take long for him to pass this period. And now Chu Liuchen was at the right age. Now that they had figured out the cause and effect, of course, the more they talked, the more they got along. Prince Cheng was also very tolerant of Chu Liuchen, like a doting elder. Even if Chu Liuchen was a rascal and moved a few pawns, he was generous and didn't point them out. They got along well with each other. And helped each other come up with ideas. It seemed that their relationship suddenly became closer. However, something happened in Duke Yong's mansion. When Qin Yuru returned to the mansion, she actually collided with another carriage. The carriage was half overturned, and Qin Yuru was injured and fainted on the ground. Qin Yuru didn't go out with Qin Huayong this time. When she went out of Duke Yong's mansion, Qin Huayong was still talking in the study of Duke Yong's mansion. When the news came, Qin Huayong was anxious to go out, but he was reported that Qin Yuru had been taken away by the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion. It was also the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion that had an accident, and the madam of the third branch of Duke Xing's mansion was sitting in the carriage. It was said that this madam was also injured, but seeing Qin Yuru was injured, she hurriedly took Qin Yuru to Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Huayong hurriedly went to Duke Xing's mansion. When he arrived at Duke Xing's mansion, he said that Duke Xing happened to be absent, and Madam of Duke Xing was taking care of the injured, so she had no time to see him. She only asked a servant to pass a message to Qin Huayong, saying that first Miss Qin had woken up at this time, but could not be moved for a while, and asked him to go back first. Qin Huayong had no choice but to go back to his general's mansion, and directly went to Madame Dowager's Xining pavilion to discuss countermeasures with her. Chapter 413. Is Big Sister badly hurt? Qin Wanru blinked her eyes, put down the medical book in her hand and asked. I heard that she is also badly hurt, so it is not convenient to move her for a while. It is said that she should not have been hit so hard, but because of the carriage of third madam, she hit it hard. Yu Jie reported. Although this was what she heard from Qin Huayong's servant, Yu Jie still didn't believe it. Others didn't know what kind of person First Miss was, but how could she not know? With First Miss's extremely selfish character, how could she hurt herself for others? Hearing that Yu Jie emphasized the word heard, Qin Wanru couldn't help laughing. She raised her eyebrows and joked, heard? Yes, that's what I heard, but I don't think it is credible. Seeing that her miss was still in the mood to tease her, Yu Jie knew that her miss must have guessed something. Her tense face relaxed, and a faint smile appeared on her face. As long as her miss understood it, it was good. She was afraid that her miss didn't think of this kind of thing and was suddenly confused. It is really good to have such a hearsay. Qin Wanru said meaningfully. First Miss is afraid that what happened in Prince Cheng's mansion will be spread out, so she made such a thing. After all, Yu Jie was not stupid, and she knew Qin Yuru's nature well. At this time, after thinking for a while, she immediately opened her eyes wide and said incredulously. This was not an ordinary thing. If something really happened, it would be fatal. She didn't believe that First Miss would be so desperate. Even if something really happened, it would not be Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru stood up, walked to the window, and looked at the wall outside the window. It seemed that the third Madam of Duke Xing's mansion did not get along well with this Madam of Duke Xing. In the last life, what happened in Duke Xing's mansion was very far away from her. If Chin Yuru did not mention it in front of her proudly when she humiliated her, it seemed to be someone or something in another world. No one could think that this was her real family. Of course, this was only a family of blood. Second miss, what should we do now? Chin Yu hesitated and asked. She had always been cautious, and she felt that there should be a follow-up. Go and prepare some clothes. Someone should be coming to invite me later. Qin Wanru thought for a while and said. Qin Yuru and Madame of Duke Xing played a good trick, and it happened to be at such a critical time. Although others would say that what happened to Qin Yuru in Prince Cheng's mansion was cheap, she had such a big accident, and it was because of others. Even if someone criticized her, the rumors would be reduced to a minimum. For the sake of the third Madame of Duke Xing's mansion, she hurt herself and couldn't even move now. For this reason, no one should blame her at this time. Ladies from aristocratic families were very particular about etiquette. Even if they were gossiping, they had to have a standard. Now Qin Yuru was still lying in bed unconscious. If they spoke ill of her at this time, it would make others doubt the character of this lady from aristocratic families. Qin Yuru grasped this critical moment very accurately. It was an excellent move. It could be regarded as a taking way to save you. With such a good reputation, she could make up for her previous bad reputation. Although it might not be able to make up for all the bad reputation, there would certainly be people who would not blame her so much for what she did in Prince Cheng's mansion. They would even help her find reasons to explain what had happened in Prince Cheng's mansion. But sometimes, man proposes, God disposes. Qin Yuru had calculated the reaction of the ladies from aristocratic families and the benefits of this matter to her. She even grasped the timing very accurately. But what she didn't calculate was the hearts of the people in the imperial court. How could it be so easy to calculate Prince Cheng? Men and women had different ways of dealing with things. They wouldn't gossip, but it was much more effective to directly take action than to gossip. Prince Cheng hadn't married for so many years, so he must have his own special ideas. He was forced to choose a concubine because he had no choice. If there was such a reason, he could choose a concubine above board. If there was such a reason, how could he not choose a concubine? Miss, do you mean that the general will ask you to take care of first miss? Hearing Qin Wanru's words, the two servant girls looked at each other and suddenly understood. Qin Yu stepped forward anxiously and said hurriedly. Duke Xing's mansion was a dangerous place. It was not a good thing for Miss to go there at this time. It doesn't matter. It's a good time. Prepare all the clothes. Qin Wanru smiled mysteriously. She turned around, walked to the dressing table and sat down. Qin Yu, help me dress. Miss, do you really want to go there? Madame of Duke Xing and First Miss have bad intentions towards you. Didn't you say that you wouldn't go there these days? Yu Jie followed her in confusion. Seeing Qin Yu put down Qin Wanru's black hair, she couldn't bear it and asked in confusion. Times have changed. Now is different from the past. This matter is big enough. Qin Wanru looked up at herself in the mirror. Under the black hair, her face looked more childish. Her skin was crystal clear and tender with a faint blush. At first glance, one could know that she looked very good. The corners of her red lips were slightly raised, which made her look very charming. In fact, this color was a little too bright, especially the corners of her lips. She bit the corners of her lips in disgust. She saw that the corners of her lips turned white at the moment when she opened them, but then they slowly returned to the previous bright red. In fact, she didn't like her overly bright color. She hadn't been sleeping well for the past few days. Every time she woke up from a nightmare, she would feel as if someone was criticizing her lips for being too alluring. So many people were criticizing her, and then she would be slapped hard in the face. Miss. Qin Yu's voice suddenly came to her ears. Qin Wanru suddenly woke up. Looking at herself in the mirror, her face was slightly pale. She actually thought of this dream again, the dream that had disturbed her sleep these days. I didn't want to go before because if I didn't go at that time, they would be more anxious and they would be more anxious to find a reason. Since they were looking for a reason, they must find a reasonable reason. Now Qin Yuru can't go out of the mansion casually. It must be reasonable, and also can be approved by father. This reason is not so easy to find. Qin Wanru calmed down and collected her thoughts. Her long eyelashes fluttered, covering the deepness at the bottom of her eyes. She didn't say some things clearly. She was just drawing up a fixed result. The specific result still depended on Qin Yuru and Madame of Duke Xing's performance. And this time, the matter of Prince Cheng's mansion also forced Qin Yuru to take action. If the matter of Prince Cheng's mansion was really publicized, she might not be able to go out in the future. Although Qin Huaiyong was partial to her, it was impossible for him to let her go out and make a fool of herself. The simplest and most direct way was to lock her up until she got married. After she got married to Duke Yong's mansion, it was not Qin Huaiyong's concern whether Qin Yuru would appear in front of others. As for whether Di Yan would marry Qin Yuru, Qin Wanru had no doubt. In the current situation, Di Yan had to marry Qin Yuru no matter what. After so many things had happened, Di Yan and Qin Yuru had long been entangled together. And she was also happy to see this. When the marriage that they had planned with all their efforts was not as happy and beautiful as they had imagined, what would happen to the two resentful couples at that time was really exciting. Qin Yuru was anxious. Madame of Duke Xing was desperate. Some things were not necessarily laid out in advance, such as the third madam who went out of the mansion this time. She needed a gap of Duke Xing's mansion. The third madam was very good. Qin Wanru's guess was right. When she had just finished dressing up, Qin Huaiyong sent someone to call her over. After asking her a few questions about what had happened in Prince Cheng's mansion, he simply said that it might be a misunderstanding. The people of Duke Yong's mansion also said that it might be a misunderstanding. They also said that they would ask Qin Yuru to explain it clearly. But now these were not important. It was not appropriate for Qin Yuru to stay in Duke Xing's mansion alone. But if they carried her back, they were afraid that she would be seriously injured and it would be inconvenient to carry her out. In the whole Qin's mansion, only Qin Wanru could go to Duke Xing's mansion to take care of Qin Yuru. So they asked Qin Wanru to go to Duke Xing's mansion to stay for a few days and accompany Qin Yuru. When Qin Yuru's injury was a little better, she could come back with Qin Yuru. Yes, father. Qin Wanru nodded and answered very respectfully. Looking at his little daughter like this, Qin Huaiyong hesitated for a moment, but still said softly, "Your big sister has been misled by Madame D in the past, but this time she still keeps the kindness in her heart. I hope you two can be closer in the future. Your big sister now has no biological mother to take care of her. Father, don't worry. I know." Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes and promised softly. At this time, her father was still so partial. He thought that the reason why Qin Yuru did so many bad things before was because of Madame D's instigation. Now he even used Madame D's matter to imply to Qin Wanru that Madame D would never be released again. In fact, he should not say this to her, should he? Was he trying to reassure her? Qin Wanru secretly raised the corner of her mouth. She was now more and more disappointed with her father. Qin Yuru was Qin Yuru's biological daughter, so it was understandable for Qin Huaiyong to be biased. However, she did not believe that Qin Huaiyong was such a person when she saw Qin Yuru's behavior. Qin Huaiyong was so biased that he seemed to have lost his usual shrewdness. Since he could see, hear, and understand, but he still behaved like this, what else couldn't she understand? She would leave Qin's mansion after all. Now she only worried about Madame Dowager and Shui Rulan. Fortunately, Madame D couldn't do anything now because of her current condition. After that, she would destroy all the wishful thinking of Qin Yuru, and then Qin Yuru wouldn't be able to make waves anymore. Father, I'll go back to tidy up some necessary clothes first. Qin Wanru said and left. Qin Huaiyong nodded and waved his hand. Qin Wanru bowed again and slowly left Qin Huayong's study with Yujie. Behind her, Qin Huayong looked at Qin Wanru's back silently, and the meaning in his eyes was unclear. After a long time, he sighed deeply, turned back to the desk, and took out something from the interlayer under the desk. After looking at it, he hesitantly held it in his hand. Chapter 4:14. Qin Wanru didn't expect to meet Nanny Huang, who came in a hurry on the way. Second Mississippi, seeing Qin Wanru, Nanny Huang didn't avoid her. Instead, she turned around from the side path and called Qin Wanru. Nanny Huang. Qin Wanru bowed sideways. Nanny Huang was the invited etiquette instructor, so her status in the mansion was naturally different from that of ordinary people. Second Miss, did something happen to First Miss? Nanny Huang asked anxiously. The news about Qin Yuru had been spread to Qin's mansion, but not many people knew the details. Did something happen to First Miss's carriage? Is she badly hurt? How could it happen all of a sudden? Nanny Huang asked anxiously. She originally wanted to go to the outer study to find Qin Huayong, but when she met Qin Wanru here, she stopped and asked Qin Wanru. She should be badly hurt. It is said that she can't get up at this time, so she is staying in Duke Xing's mansion. It is not suitable for her to move. Qin Wanru looked at Nanny Huang calmly and said. She is in Duke Xing's mansion now. Nanny Huang looked surprised. Qin Wanru nodded and turned around, looking like she was in a hurry to leave. Second Miss, are you going to Duke Xing's mansion to see First Miss? Nanny Huang asked hurriedly. Big sister is alone in Duke Xing's mansion, and it is not convenient for mother and grandmother. It is more suitable for me to watch over her, Qin Wanru said slowly. Indeed, that was the reason why she had prepared in advance. Second Miss, can you take me to see her? I am worried about First Mississippi, Nanny Huang suggested. Nanny, do you also want to go? Qin Wanru widened her bright watery eyes in surprise and looked Nanny Huang up and down. Nanny Huang was Qin Yuru's etiquette instructor. Naturally, it was inconvenient for her to control Qin Yuru like a supervisor nanny, and she would not really treat Qin Yuru as her master. If an etiquette instructor was just an etiquette instructor, she and Qin Yuru would have an employer-employee relationship, so there was really no need to worry so much. First Miss has been good to me before. Now she is hurt like this, I have to go to see her. Madam's current situation makes it inconvenient for her to go to see First Miss, Nanny Huang said very sincerely. In this way, he and Qin Yuru really got along well. Yujie was stunned and looked at Nanny Huang as if she had seen a ghost. Fortunately, Nanny Huang had good self-restraint. Even under Yujie's stunned gaze, her expression did not change at all, as if she really had a good relationship with Qin Yuru. Since Nanny also wants to go, then just follow me. I'll go back to pack some clothes first. Nanny, wait for me at the carriage. Qin Wanru slightly narrowed her eyes, which were deep and serene. All right, then I'll go and wait first. Nanny Huang said straightforwardly. After that, she turned around with the little servant girl behind her and went directly to the yard where carriages were parked in the mansion. Miss, what is she going to do? Seeing Nanny Huang walking away, Yujie asked in confusion. Naturally, it's to come up with a plan. Qin Wanru turned around and continued to walk inside slowly. They were the ones who were anxious, not her. She didn't have to rush there. She just needed to pack things slowly. If there was no accident, this time she would go to Duke Xing's mansion to make a big scene. Of course, she had to keep up with the follow-up. Nanny Huang is going to help First Miss to come up with a plan. Then why do we still take her? Yujie followed behind Qin Wanru and said in confusion, since she follows First Miss wholeheartedly, she will be against you. Miss, you shouldn't take her with you. It's good to take her with us. Otherwise, Qin Yuru will have no helper around her. When she wants to do something, she will have no helper. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and said meaningfully. Qin Yuru was not a quiet person. She would always do something. Qin Wanru didn't need her to be quiet. The more restless Qin Yuru was, the better. She would always pick out all kinds of things that Madame of Duke Xing didn't expect. Qin Wanru couldn't let Madame of Duke Xing control all the situations in her hands. Qin Yuru was very good. She was good at stirring up trouble. With Nanny Huang, she would have a helper. It didn't mean that Nanny Huang was not smart enough. Nanny Huang knew little about the affairs of Qin's mansion. It was not appropriate for her to come up with some ideas. Just like what happened in Prince Cheng's mansion this time, Qin Wanru was 100% sure that it was not Nanny Huang who came up with the idea that Qin Yuru had hooked up with Prince Cheng. It was Qin Yuru who wanted to cling to the rich and powerful, so she made such a scene. At this time, not only Madame of Duke Xing didn't know, but even Nanny Huang didn't know that Qin Yuru had made such a big mistake. Next, it was up to them to help Qin Yuru cover up this mistake. Madame of Duke Xing thought that everything would be fine after she made Qin Yuru into Duke Xing's mansion. But she didn't expect that Qin Yuru's problem also fell on Duke Xing's mansion. Because Qin Wanru had to tidy up and pack some spare things, she was a little slow. This time, she brought the two servant girls Chu Lu and Yujie to Duke Xing's mansion, and also brought some necessary clothes to change. When they arrived at the parking place, Nanny Huang was so anxious that she paced in circles several times. Seeing Qin Wanru coming, she breathed a sigh of relief. Nanny Huang, sorry to keep you waiting. Let's get in the carriage together. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and invited her. Second miss, you are too polite. Nanny Huang was not Qin Yuru after all. At this time, she had calmed down and said with a gentle look. Qin Wanru got in the carriage first, followed by Nanny Huang. The two servant girls got in the carriage last. The little servant girl who had followed Nanny Huang before did not come. The carriage was not big, but it was spacious for 4 people. After everyone sat down, the coachman drove the carriage to Duke Xing's mansion. Along the way, it was very quiet in the carriage. Qin Wanru slightly closed her eyes to rest. Under her long eyelashes, no one could see whether her eyes were closed or open. Nanny Huang lowered her head and frowned tightly. When she got in the carriage, she actually wanted to talk to Qin Wanru. However, as soon as Qin Wanru got in the carriage, she leaned against the carriage wall and closed her eyes to rest, so it was not convenient to disturb her. Qin Wanru did not speak, so it was not convenient for Nanny Huang to talk to the two servant girls. The way to collide with the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion was indeed her idea. When 2 carriages collided, it also needed to be calculated. Originally, she wanted Qin Yuru to spread the news today, and then they would discuss it. Who would expect that they directly collided today? Could it be that he really bumped into it by accident? Nanny Huang had always had a doubt in her heart. She originally wanted to ask Qin Wanru about it, but now she could only figure it out by herself. The more she thought about it, the more she felt that there was something wrong. They had agreed to wait for the next opportunity to take action. How could it be so fast? She looked up at Qin Wanru. She could not see it from her face, but she inexplicably felt anxious in her heart. She always felt that this matter would not be as calm as it seemed. All the way to Duke Xing's mansion, she felt uneasy. When the carriage stopped, Nanny Huang jumped out of the carriage first, then the 2 servant girls, and finally Qin Wanru jumped out with Yujie's hand. Second Miss Qin, please. Nanny Sheng had been waiting outside the carriage. Seeing Qin Wanru come down, she bowed to Qin Wanru and led her forward with a smile. After walking for quite a while, they finally arrived at the entrance of a courtyard. Qin Wanru frowned as she looked at the road she came from. This courtyard was very close to Chuehua Gate. Soon after entering Chuehua Gate, they arrived at this courtyard. First Miss Qin arranged for a guest house. In order to make it convenient to invite a doctor, our madam arranged for first Miss Qin to stay here. It will be more convenient for a doctor to go in and out. Seeing that Qin Wanru looked back at the old maid at the Chuehua gate, Nanny Sheng immediately understood her meaning and explained with a smile. Therefore, this place should be very close to the outer court. Nanny Sheng, how is our first Mrs. injury? Nanny Huang didn't pay attention to these things and couldn't help asking anxiously at this time. You are? Nanny Sheng looked Nanny Huang up and down and felt that the old maid in front of her was not like the supervisor of the Qin's mansion. This is Nanny Huang, big sister's etiquette instructor. Qin Wanru introduced with a smile. Etiquette instructor? Why did she come here at this time? Nanny Sheng frowned secretly. She didn't think that Qin Yuru's injury had anything to do with an etiquette instructor, but she naturally wouldn't say anything excessive in front of Nanny Huang. She immediately said with a flattering smile, Nanny Huang, don't worry. First miss is fine. Nothing big happened, so it's just a small matter. Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes in surprise, and a trace of coldness flashed at the bottom of her eyes. How is first miss? Nanny Huang really cared about Qin Yuru. When she heard Nanny Sheng's tone, her face darkened. She hurt her hand, but it's not very serious. It's just inconvenient for her to move. Nanny Sheng told the truth. It was really an accident. She just bumped into Nanny Sheng a little. The coachman of Duke Xing's mansion had long been bribed by Madame. Originally, Madame planned to go out by herself, but it happened that third Madame was going out and wanted to borrow Madame's carriage. So Madame lent her carriage to third Madame. Whether it was Madame or third Madame, they were just a trick. However, they didn't expect that the carriage, which was supposed to be just a slight bump, would really startle the horse. Although the coachman finally restrained the horse on the shaft, the carriage really hit the horse. Third Madame was seriously injured, and first Miss Qin seemed to be seriously injured. Fortunately, the rest had been arranged well. No matter how serious it was, they would directly take Qin Wanru and say something serious. They also took the opportunity to say that first Miss Qin saved third Madame. Her hand is broken. Nanny Huang said in a trembling voice. She just planned to let Qin Yuru hit the carriage a little and then say that she was injured. She didn't expect that she really hurt her hand. It's not broken. She just needs to take good care of it. She twisted her tendon, Nanny Sheng said vaguely. Let's go to see big sister first. Was it self-defeating? It was really an unexpected result. This third Madame was really wronged. If Qin Yuru had planned it well, she would not be completely unprepared. Qin Yuru's carriage seemed to be mysterious. She would find an opportunity to let someone have a look. Qin Wanru already had an idea in her mind. She looked at Nanny Sheng and said lightly. Okay, okay. Second miss, please go and have a look yourself. Nanny Sheng immediately said with a flattering smile. While talking, she had entered the yard. Only as soon as they stepped into the yard, they heard a sharp scream, which scared everyone and made them stop. Chapter 4:15. Was this the consequence of twisting her tendons? Qin Wanru looked at Qin Yuru in front of her in astonishment. Her face was still the same. Except that it was a little twisted, her body seemed to be fine. She had just waved her hand and knocked a servant girl to the ground. Her legs and feet were also fine. She stood there steadily and seemed to be nothing serious on her body. Indeed, she didn't suffer much injury. The only eyesore was her tilted head. Yes, her head was tilted to one side, stiff, and her entire person looked extremely strange, as if her head had been forcefully tilted to one side. That originally beautiful face did not look the slightest bit beautiful at this moment. Not only was it twisted, but it also looked sinister. Qin Wanru, what are you doing here? Who asked you to come here? Qin Yuru screamed in pain because the servant girl accidentally touched her neck, and then she knocked the servant girl to the ground. She did not expect that Qin Wanru would come in at this time. For a moment, she was full of hatred and anger. She screamed at Qin Wanru loudly. Qin Wanru. Although she was prepared for the car crash, she did not expect that there would be an accident and she really twisted her neck. Although the doctor said that it was not a big deal and she would be fine after a period of rest, she was caught by Qin Wanru when she was in a mess. Nanny Huang frowned and wanted to say something, but she still closed her mouth after looking at Nanny Sheng. However, her face was a little ugly. Now there were so many people and it was not convenient to ask Qin Yuru some questions. She could only stand aside and see the situation first. First miss, second miss is here to see you. Nanny Sheng's face darkened and she said coldly to Qin Yuru. She didn't say much, but the warning in her words made Qin Yuru's face turn pale and she immediately came to her senses. However, she couldn't put on a show of sisterhood to Qin Wanru at once. She snorted coldly, turned back to sit in the chair, tilted her head and squinted at Qin Wanru, and her voice became low. Did father ask you to see me? How did big sister hit the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Wanru smiled slightly and sat in the chair on the other side with a calm look. She didn't show too much affection to Qin Yuru and looked like she was asking a question. What do you mean by that? It was the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion that hit me. If I hadn't asked the coachman to stabilize the horse, the third madam of Duke Xing's mansion would have been in big trouble. She had always been unwilling to show weakness in front of Qin Wanru. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, she immediately retorted. Big sister, do you mean that the carriage of the third madam of Duke Xing's mansion hit it on its own initiative? Qin Wanru frowned and looked like she wanted to figure out the truth of the matter. Qin Yuru reached out to touch her twisted neck and said angrily, of course it was someone else who bumped into me. I've become like this because of her. She was very angry. She had thought clearly about the accident that would happen if she collided with the carriage of Duke Xing's mansion. Therefore, she brought a few quilts in the carriage. Of course, she was afraid that the collision would be too heavy. If she was really hurt, the loss would outweigh the gain. Unexpectedly, she had protected her hands and feet, but failed to protect her head. She accidentally twisted it, and now her neck had not been twisted. Although the doctor said that it was not a big deal and that it would recover in a few days, she could not meet others in this state. Moreover, Qin Wanru had seen it. This was the last thing she wanted. It was the third madam of Duke Xing's mansion who hit your carriage? Qin Wanru seemed to not understand and asked again. Is it possible that it is fake? Of course, it was she who hit me. Qin Yuru thought that Qin Wanru did not believe it, so she said angrily. Nanny Sheng, what's wrong with the carriage of the third madam of your mansion? Why did she hit someone on the street for no reason? Qin Wanru slightly raised the corner of her mouth and slid from Qin Yuru's face to Nanny Sheng's face. Her watery eyes were cold. It was an accident. Who knew that such a thing would happen? In fact, the carriage of our mansion was fine before. I don't know why it collided with the carriage of the first Miss Qin. Fortunately, both of them are fine now. But it is not suitable for the first Miss Qin to go out in this state, so she can stay in our mansion to rest for a while and see if there are other injuries. Nanny Sheng explained with a smile. Accident? Qin Wanru seemed to be a little suspicious. Nanny Sheng's heart skipped a beat and she felt inexplicably uneasy. But she still said with a smile, of course it is an accident. No one can explain why such a thing happened. Our third madam is seriously injured and can't get up at this time. Compared with Qin Yuru who had been prepared for it, the third madam of Duke Xing's mansion was completely unaware of it. She was much more seriously injured than Qin Yuru and was still lying in bed at this time. Qin Wanru stood up and said, I will go to see the third madam. Since she came here on behalf of the people of Qin's mansion, she naturally had to see the third madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Before she came here, she also brought a gift. Thank you for your kindness, second Miss Qin, but our third madam is not in the mood to meet guests at this time. Nanny Sheng said with an embarrassed look. Is the third madam so seriously injured? Qin Wanru asked in surprise. Nanny Sheng nodded and looked a little serious. Our third madam is indeed seriously injured, and it is really inconvenient for her to meet guests at this time. In this case, please give the gift to the third madam to show our mansion's apology, Nanny Sheng, Qin Wanru said softly. Since Nanny Sheng said so, she naturally could not be an unwelcome guest and forced to see the third madam of Duke Xing's mansion. She could be sure that the third madam was really seriously injured. Qin Yuru was actually unscathed, except for the fact that she had accidentally twisted her neck. Her so-called injury was just a way of saying it. A trace of serenity flashed through her watery eyes, and a trace of sarcasm silently slid through the corners of her mouth. One reason was that the third madam was seriously injured, and the other reason was that she was not allowed to see the third madam because she was afraid that she would ask something. However, since she did not ask, she could also contact the third madam. The third madam of Duke Xing's mansion naturally did not have the power of Madam of Duke Xing, but she was not useless. Thank you, second Miss Qin. I will go to the first miss for a while. It is inconvenient for the first miss to go out now, so second miss, please choose a room to live in and go back when the first miss feels better. Nanny Sheng nodded repeatedly and said with a smile. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and gestured to the servant girl behind her. The servant girl came forward to give the gift in her hand, and Nanny Sheng also asked someone to receive it. Qin Wanru chose the room on the right of Qin Yuru to live in. Qin Yuru lived in the main room of this courtyard. The room on the right of Qin Wanru was also facing the direction of the inner courtyard, and the room on the other side was facing the direction of the outer courtyard. This courtyard happened to be near Chuehua Gate, with one side facing the outer courtyard and the other side facing the inner courtyard. After Wanru chose a room, Nanny Sheng gave a few instructions to the servant girl in the courtyard, and then went back to report with the gift sent by Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru stood in the courtyard and squinted at the big pine tree in the courtyard. Although this courtyard was large, it looked a little solemn on the whole. There was a small pavilion under the big tree, with stone tables and stone benches in it, which was a very elegant place. In addition, the courtyard was clean, and there were no flowers or plants. There were pavilions on the wall of the courtyard, some in the inner courtyard, and some in the outer courtyard. Duke Xing's mansion had built many pavilions of different shapes like this. Looking from a distance, it made people feel that the magnificence of Duke Xing's mansion was not comparable to that of ordinary families. Because it was the Qin sisters who lived in it now, each of them had a personal servant girl with them. Duke Xing's mansion only provided an old maid to guard the door and two inferior servant girls to serve in the courtyard, and they were responsible for all the cleaning outside. After all, they were the misses of other mansions, and they lived here as guests, so this practice was very normal. Second miss, the first miss invites you in. Mei Shui hurried out of the room and bowed to Qin Wanru respectfully. What's the matter? Qin Wanru ignored her and walked into the pavilion leisurely. Yujie hurriedly picked up a cushion on the side and put it on one side of the fence for her. Qin Wanru sat down and leaned against the fence. The first miss is not feeling well, and she wants you to invite another doctor to have a look. Mei Shui had to follow and answered. You don't believe the doctor invited by Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Wanru raised her eyes slightly. Her eyes were clear but no emotion could be seen. It's not that I don't believe it, but... First miss is afraid of leaving sequelae. Mei Shui said uneasily. Although the doctor promised that there was nothing wrong, as a woman, who was willing to twist her neck. This situation could not be tolerated for a day, let alone there were still a few days left. Her first miss was so temperamental, so Mei Shui really did not dare to waste time, so she just proposed to Qin Yuru that they could invite a few more doctors to have a look. Previously, they were all from Duke Xing's mansion, so it was embarrassing to say more. But now the second miss came, they could ask the second miss to help them to invite more doctors. On the one hand, it could speed up the treatment of the neck, and on the other hand, it could let outsiders know that Qin Yuru was seriously injured and invited one doctor after another. Will there be sequelae? Qin Wanru asked unhurriedly. Mei Shui's forehead began to sweat. I don't know. Since you don't know, let's leave it like this for the time being. Although big sister looks a little ugly now, child D is not here now. He will not see big sister in such an ugly look, so it's okay. Qin Wanru raised her delicate little face and said in a soft voice, but her words were extremely sarcastic. Second miss. Mei Shui still wanted to beg, but was interrupted by Yujie rudely. Mei Shui, you go back first. First miss looks like this now, no matter how many doctors are invited to have a look, it will be useless. Instead, more people will see it as a joke. Her words were also extremely sarcastic, almost not giving any face to Qin Yuru. The first Mississippi Mei Shui was angry and indignant, but she could do nothing. She bit her lip, looked at Qin Wanru who looked leisurely, gnashed her teeth, and turned to leave. Qin Wanru, what do you mean? In fact, the room was not far away. Qin Yuru, who had been standing by the window and looking out of the window, also heard the words of Qin Wanru and Yujie at this time. She was so angry that her face turned livid. She immediately couldn't bear it, opened the door, and walked out, and said angrily. Nanny Huang wanted to stop her, but it was too late. Big sister, you look like this now, why are you still making trouble? You have made trouble in Prince Cheng's mansion before. Do you want to make trouble in Duke Xing's mansion now? Qin Wanru stood up helplessly, looked at Qin Yuru who rushed out to denounce her. Her voice was not high, but it was enough to make Qin Yuru burst with anger, especially when she mentioned the matter of Prince Cheng's mansion. She raised her hand and was about to slap Qin Wanru's tender little face. Yujie reacted quickly, took Qin Wanru a step back, and happened to avoid Qin Yuru's slap. Chapter 4:16. The first miss of Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Yes. This is really disgraceful. The man said coldly and moved his eyes away from the window. His pavilion was a little far away, but he could still see Qin Yuru rushing out in an aggressive manner. The two sisters of Qin's mansion did not get along well with each other, but he did not expect it to be so bad. Moreover, the first Miss Qin looked really hateful, while the second Miss Qin had her back to him, so he could not see her specific appearance, but he could see that she was the weaker one. The first Miss Qin just said a few words to a servant girl, and then she rushed out to hit her. It could be seen how shrewish and fierce she was. This woman looked really unpleasant. Qin Wanru, are you here to accompany me or to annoy me in Duke Xing's mansion? Qin Yuru became angrier when she failed to hit Qin Wanru. She did not expect that someone would see them in the pavilion. She only felt that there were no outsiders here, so she did not need to suppress her temper. Fortunately, she also knew that this was Duke Xing's mansion, so she did not chase after Qin Wanru after she failed to hit her. She just stared at Qin Wanru fiercely. Big sister, you don't think that the matter of Prince Cheng's mansion is over, do you? Qin Wanru raised her watery eyes, looked at Qin Yuru calmly, and said. She looked too calm, and there was no change in her expression, but this made Qin Yuru panic. How could she not be afraid of the matter of Prince Cheng's mansion? That was why she could not wait to send a letter to Madam of Duke Xing. Does it have anything to do with you? Qin Wanru, don't worry about it. Qin Yuru was annoyed when this matter was mentioned. She snorted angrily, turned around and walked into the room. Hearing Qin Wanru's words, she immediately felt that she should tell this matter to Madam of Duke Xing first, and was not in the mood to trouble Qin Wanru anymore. Nanny Huang happened to come, and she had to discuss it with Nanny Huang. Let's go out for a walk. Seeing Qin Yuru rushing back to the room, Qin Wanru knew that she was going to discuss with Nanny Huang. She also stood up and walked outside. Sure enough, Nanny Huang was helping Qin Yuru with ideas. When Qin Yuru met Nanny Huang for the first time, she felt that this etiquette instructor was also very arrogant. At that time, when she looked at Qin Yuru, she seemed to weigh the pros and cons for a while. It could be seen that although she was entrusted by Duke Yong's mansion, she did not mean to help Qin Yuru wholeheartedly. It had only been a short time, but he was already helping Qin Yuru wholeheartedly. Qin Yuru would not believe that Duke Yong's mansion had nothing to do with this. As an etiquette instructor, Nanny Huang must have a lot of secret connections. I need to be more careful. Right now, he had something more important to do. Yes, miss. Yujia nodded and followed her. They went out of the courtyard one after another. Not far from the courtyard was the Chuehua Gate. There were two supervisor old maids chatting at the Chuehua Gate. Seeing Qin Wanru coming out of the courtyard, the two old maids did not take it seriously. They squinted at her and continued to chat. Qin Wanru turned and walked inside casually. After a few steps, she suddenly stopped and turned to walk to the two old maids. The two old maids were chatting enthusiastically. When one of them saw Qin Wanru coming over, she reached out and pulled the sleeves of the other old maid, hinting to her. The other old maid also turned around reluctantly. May I ask which courtyard is the third madam of your mansion? Qin Wanru came over and asked with a smile. Our third madam lives in the westernmost courtyard, which is far from here. The old maid impatiently pointed to the distance. How is the injury of your third madam? Qin Wanru asked again as if she did not see the deep displeasure on the old maid's face. Our third madam is naturally seriously injured. She can't get up at this time. The old maid looked Qin Wanru up and down and said indifferently. Although the third madam had no power in the mansion, she was their master after all. It was obvious that the third madam was seriously injured, but she treated the first miss of the Qin's mansion as a treasure. The two old maids guarding the gate were very indignant for their third madam. She said that she saved the third madam, but it was she who bumped into the third madam and seriously injured her. Is the third madam so seriously injured? Qin Wanru looked surprised. Of course, our third madam is seriously injured. It doesn't look like. One of the old maids glanced at Qin Yuru's courtyard and was about to continue when the other old maid pulled her sleeves hard. The old maid closed her mouth, but she looked extremely angry. Although she did not speak, she looked at Qin Wanru with some unkindness. Second Miss Qin, our third madam is seriously injured. Even if you go there now, I am afraid you can't see third madam. The other old maid smiled and went forward to support Qin Wanru. Can I see your third miss? Qin Wanru asked softly. She was asking Xiao Caihuan, the eldest daughter of the third branch. Our third miss is not free at this time. She is serving our third madam. The old maid made an excuse. It was obvious that she was unwilling to take Qin Wanru there. Can you help to find a doctor? Qin Wanru frowned and changed the topic helplessly. Isn't the first miss fine? Why does she need to find a doctor? The old maid who was quick to speak said discontentedly as she looked at the courtyard next to her. The two old maids guarded the Chuehua Gate, which was close to the courtyard where Qin Yuru lived temporarily. Others might not know the extent of Qin Yuru's injury, but the two old maids knew it clearly. The doctor clearly said that the first Miss Qin was fine. She just twisted her neck and was a little inconvenient. Big sister said that the injury was very serious and wanted to find another doctor. Qin Wanru's attitude became more and more kind. Her manner was delicate and decent. Although she looked young, her temperament was extraordinary. Compared with Qin Wanru, who caused the third madam of their mansion to be injured, Qin Yuru was much better. Second Miss Qin, don't mind me talking too much. First Miss Qin is really fine. She just twisted her neck. To put it bluntly, even when she is sleeping, she will sometimes twist her neck. It's really not a big deal. The old maid with a good attitude explained to Qin Wanru, who looked worried. Can I trouble you two to find a doctor for our young miss? Our first miss has a bad temper. Yujia stepped forward and took out 2 purses from her sleeve with a smile. She put them in the hands of the 2 old maids and said in a low voice. Pinching the purses in their hands, the 2 old maids felt that there was a lot of money in them. The 2 old maids looked better. Since second Miss Qin must find a doctor, I can also do it for her. But I have to say this first. I am afraid that even if you find another doctor, he will say the same. It doesn't matter. I just have to trouble you two nannies. But can you find another doctor? If all the doctors say the same, big sister will believe it. Qin Wanru smiled and explained kindly. In other words, Qin Yuru was suspicious by nature. She still didn't believe a doctor after seeing it. The two old maids looked at each other and had a good impression of Qin Wanru. Since they had received money from her, they naturally had to do something. Anyway, it was the same to find a doctor or two doctors. The two old maids discussed and left one to guard the door, while the other went out to find a doctor. Before, Madame had repeatedly told them not to treat the first miss of Qin's mansion poorly. Although they felt indignant for their third madam, they did not dare to really offend the first Miss Qin. They heard that their old madam liked the first Miss Qin very much. Seeing an old maid leave in a hurry, Qin Wanru turned around and walked inside casually. But this time, she was stopped by a beautiful servant girl before she walked for a long time. Greetings, second Miss Qin. The servant girl stepped forward and bowed to Qin Wanru, and happened to block Qin Wanru's way. Qin Wanru stood still. I was sent by old madam. Our old madam wants to see second Miss Qin. The servant girl said with a smile. Okay. Qin Wanru thought for a moment, lowered her eyes and nodded. Old madam of Duke Xing's mansion met Qin Wanru in her own yard. After Qin Wanru came in and bowed, old madam looked Qin Wanru up and down with a cold face. Old madam, this is the second miss of Qin's mansion. Seeing old madam's unkind face, Nanny Yu hurriedly stepped forward to smooth things over and introduced her again with a smile. Qin Wanru stood aside with her head down. Under her long eyelashes, her eyes were cold. It could be seen that this old madam disliked her very much. At this time, she was imposing on her. Thank you for saving me before, second Miss Qin. Old madam said slowly after looking at Qin Wanru up and down. There was no smile on her face. She said the so-called life-saving grace in such a light tone. It's just a piece of cake. Old madam, you don't have to be so polite. Qin Wanru raised her eyes, restrained the emotions at the bottom of her eyes, and said lightly. Since the one who was saved did not care about it, why should she bear the life-saving grace? I heard that second Miss Qin and first Miss have always been on bad terms. Only when sisters get along well can family peace and everything will be prosperous. Old madam coughed in a low voice and looked at her a few more times before saying. Nanny Yu's face was a little pale. Old madam's words were extremely unpleasant. She clearly meant to rebuke Qin Wanru. If Qin Wanru was just an ordinary miss from an aristocratic family, with the identity of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion, she could rebuke her. However, Qin Wanru was the life-saving grace of old madam of Duke Xing's mansion. Old madam might not take it seriously. After all, she directly fainted at that time and did not see Qin Wanru at all. At this time, she pretended not to know much. However, Nanny Yu directly confronted Qin Wanru at that time. Old madam's words made her feel extremely embarrassed. She felt ungrateful and despised Qin Wanru. Thank you for your concern, old madam. Qin Wanru did not explain but just smiled slightly and said lightly. Qin Wanru did not like this old madam of Duke Xing's mansion, who was also her real grandmother. She did not believe that this old madam of Duke Xing's mansion really knew nothing and was so confused that she was led by the nose by Madam of Duke Xing. I heard that second Miss Qin and first Miss Qin quarreled on the street before, because of the pair of blood jade bracelets I gave to first Miss Qin before. Since second Miss Qin likes it, here is a pair. Nanny Yu, go and get it. Although old madam was smiling, her smile was a little cold. She reached out and waved to Nanny Yu, and said casually. Chapter 4:17. Qin Wanru was so angry that she almost laughed. Old madam of Duke Xing's mansion really thought that she was superior to others. She casually dismissed her as if she was a beggar. Moreover, she even pushed all the blame for the quarrel with Qin Yuru on the street to her. Her deliberate act of shielding Qin Yuru made her look like an old grandmother who was extremely partial to her own granddaughter. But did she really care about her granddaughter so much? She sneered in her heart but didn't show it on her face. She stepped forward and said respectfully to Old Madam, "Thank you for your kindness, Old Madam, but I don't like blood jade bracelets." "I'm afraid Old Madam has misunderstood. I don't like Big Sister's blood jade bracelets no matter how beautiful they are. Great Elder Princess gave me a pair of blood jade bracelets before, and I also gave them to Big Sister." Since Madame Dowager tried to suppress her, she had to mention her maternal grandmother. As expected, Old Madam's face immediately darkened when she heard this, and she became more and more displeased with Qin Wanru. She snorted and said, "Since Great Elder Princess gave you blood jade bracelets, I won't give you blood jade bracelets. This time your big sister was seriously injured because she saved someone. She is a good girl. Go back and ask your grandmother to come here. I have something to discuss with her." Old Madam looked at Qin Wanru proudly and said, as if she didn't want to talk to her, "Grandmother is not in good health. I'm afraid she can't come here." Qin Wanru said respectfully. "Then ask your mother to come here." Old Madam became impatient and frowned. She increasingly disliked Qin Wanru. "Mother is pregnant, and it's not convenient." Qin Wanru continued to refuse calmly. "Then ask your father to come here." Old Madam said impatiently. "Yes." Qin Wanru lowered her head and said obediently. "Go back and ask your father to come here first." Old Madam waved her hand and looked like she didn't want to talk to Qin Wanru anymore. Qin Wanru bowed to her very respectfully and then left. Seeing Old Madam treat her miss so rudely, Yujie was very angry. When she went outside and was about to say something, she saw Qin Wanru turn to look at her, so she immediately stopped talking. When she returned to the courtyard, the two doctors invited by the old maid who guarded the door had come and were checking Qin Yuru's pulse. Qin Wanru stood beside Qin Yuru calmly. After taking his pulse, another doctor came over. "Doctor, how is my neck?" Qin Yuru asked anxiously. She had finished feeling her pulse. Said the doctor. "Miss, your neck is fine. You just need to rest for a few more days and get someone to massage it appropriately." The doctor who had finished checking her pulse comforted her. "It's really nothing. Don't worry, eldest miss." The other doctor also finished checking her pulse and stood up. Qin Wanru stepped forward and asked, "Big sister had a car crash. Besides the injury on her neck, do you have any other internal injuries? Hidden injuries?" The two doctors looked at each other and shook their heads. "This young lady is very well. Apart from a sprained tendon in her neck, there is nothing else wrong with her," a doctor said with a smile. "The injury on his neck isn't a big one. He'll be fine after resting for a few days," another doctor said with a smile. Both of them looked relaxed. Obviously, Qin Yuru's injury was not a big deal. But the other madam was seriously injured before. "Is my big sister really fine?" Qin Wanru frowned and raised doubts. This was what Qin Yuru wanted to ask. Hearing Qin Wanru's question, she immediately nodded. "Yes, the madam who had a car crash with me said that it was a very serious accident." "Am I really fine?" The reason why Qin Yuru was worried that she was also seriously injured was that she saw the third madam of Duke Xing's mansion covered in blood being carried down. At that time, she was frightened and felt guilty. "First miss, you are really fine," the doctor comforted her. "Really fine?" Qin Yuru still didn't believe it. "Really fine. If you don't believe me, you can ask another doctor to have a look." Being repeatedly questioned by Qin Yuru about his medical skills, a doctor's face didn't look very good. He felt that this first miss was a little unreasonable. Why didn't she understand what he said? "First miss, it's great that the doctor said you are fine." Seeing that Qin Yuru still wanted to say something, Nanny Huang immediately stepped forward and stopped her with a smile. Really fine. Qin Yuru muttered to herself. She felt uncomfortable all over, as if she was aching all over. Yujie, take the 2 doctors to the side to write a prescription. Qin Wanru smiled slightly and ordered Yujie. 2 doctors, please come with me. I still have the consultation fee from our Mississippi, Yujie understood and said with a smile. The 2 doctors were very satisfied with this. They immediately nodded and followed Yujie to go out. You invited them? After the 2 doctors left, Qin Yuru's face changed. When the 2 doctors came to visit, they only said that they were invited by the servants of Duke Xing's mansion. She thought it was Madame of Duke Xing who invited them for her. Big sister, do you think it is Duke Xing's mansion who invited them? Qin Wanru said lightly. She sat down on a chair beside and poured herself a cup of tea. Qin Wanru, are you trying to fool me again? Qin Yuru sneered. Originally, she was dubious about the words of the 2 doctors. At this time, she immediately felt that none of their words were credible. The people invited by Qin Wanru did not all listen to Qin Wanru. Big sister, what do you want to do? This is Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Wanru said in a slightly cold voice. I don't want the doctors you invited. I don't know where you found these quacks. Drive them away. Qin Yuru was furious and screamed. At this time, she only cared about being angry at Qin Wanru. She did not expect that her voice was several times louder. Not only did Qin Wanru hear it clearly, but also the 2 doctors outside heard it clearly. Hearing this, the 2 doctors were so angry that their faces changed. They were doctors with good reputations. They did not expect that they would be questioned like this. They were immediately unhappy. They turned to the main room and snorted coldly. Without writing a prescription, they carried the medicine box and turned to leave angrily. 2 doctors, please prescribe medicine for our first miss before you leave. Yujie chased after them and shouted at the gate of the courtyard to the 2 doctors who were about to go out of Chuehua Gate. Your first miss is not sick at all. Why should she take medicine? One doctor said angrily. But our first miss feels sick. Yujie said anxiously. Your first miss just has a stiff neck and sprained her neck. She doesn't need to take medicine. Although the other doctor was calmer, he was also annoyed by Qin Yuru's words at this time. After saying this, he turned to leave with the previous doctor. The 2 old maids guarding the gate gave a few hollow laughs and did not dare to stop them. The doctor they invited was a famous doctor in the capital city. No one dared to offend such a famous doctor. Next time, it would be your turn to ask for help when you are sick. You could offend anyone but a doctor. Miss, the doctor left without prescribing medicine. Seeing the 2 doctors left without looking back, Yujie came back helplessly and reported to Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru, don't meddle in this. I asked you to invite a doctor, but you didn't do it. Now you secretly invite a doctor. What are your intentions? Qin Yuru looked Qin Wanru up and down suspiciously. She really didn't believe that Qin Wanru would be so kind. She asked Mei Shui to ask Qin Wanru for a doctor just to sound her out. She didn't really want Qin Wanru to ask for a doctor. Qin Wanru was willing to invite a doctor, but she was not willing to let Qin Wanru invite a doctor. First miss, I will go after the 2 doctors and ask them to prescribe medicine for first miss before leaving. Nanny Huang realized that it was not good, so she interrupted Qin Yuru and suggested. Doctors were in contact with all kinds of people. Nanny Huang only regretted that she did not think of it before. At this time, after asking Qin Yuru, she wanted to go out to chase after the 2 doctors. She had to pay the 2 doctors to shut up. Nanny Huang, I've already paid the deposit. Qin Wanru looked up at Nanny Huang, who looked anxious, and said. What? You still have to pay them? I don't know where the doctors came from. How dare they cheat money? Nanny Huang, you don't have to go after them. Even if they prescribe medicine, I dare not take it. Qin Yuru immediately misunderstood Nanny Huang's meaning and said angrily. First Miss, the two doctors are famous doctors in the capital city. They also know a lot of people. They will not cheat money. Nanny Huang said anxiously. Qin Wanru was still sitting here, so she could not say some words very directly. She only hoped that Qin Yuru could understand the meaning of this. That's hard to say. Who knows how much money they have secretly paid them to make them lie. Qin Yuru snorted coldly and said disdainfully. She squinted at Qin Wanru and said meaningfully. Qin Wanru did not seem to understand that Qin Yuru was talking about her. She leaned back and looked at Nanny Huang with a faint smile. Nanny Huang, you can go after them and ask if they have received a lot of money. Nanny Huang could not respond for a moment. If she went after them now, it meant that she also thought that the two doctors had received money from Qin Wanru and lied. This was what Qin Yuru said, but she could not say it. Second Miss, you must be joking. I just want to ask about First Miss's condition. Nanny Huang smiled very awkwardly, but had to stop. Big sister knows best about big sister's health. Nanny Huang, you seem to care about big sister very much recently. Qin Wanru looked at Nanny Huang with a faint smile and said. I have the responsibility to educate First Mississippi. Of course, I can't let First Miss do anything wrong. Nanny Huang knew that she could not catch up at this time, so she could only say seriously. It's good that Nanny Huang can think in this way. Then I will trouble Nanny Huang to educate big sister. I will go to have a rest first. Qin Wanru stood up and said casually. Her words made Nanny Huang's face change and she was shocked. Qin Wanru, what do you mean? Qin Yuru said sharply. Nothing, I just feel tired. There are so many things today, including Prince Cheng's mansion and Duke Xing's mansion. Don't you feel tired, big sister? Qin Wanru reached out and gently pressed her forehead a few times and said helplessly. Her words made Qin Yuru tremble with fear and her face changed greatly. She had asked Mei Shui to find Madame of Duke Xing, but Madame of Duke Xing had not come yet. Did something happen? Chapter 418. Mei Shui rushed in and saw Qin Wanru in the room. After being stunned for a moment, she hurriedly stopped and hesitated. What's the matter? Qin Yuru was angry. Seeing Mei Shui making a fuss, she said with a straight face. First Miss. Madame of Duke Xing asks you to go over. Mei Shui also saw other people in the room at this time and whispered. How can I go over like this? Qin Yuru said angrily. She still twisted her neck. If she went over like this, many people would laugh at her, and Madame of Duke Xing knew it. First Miss, several misses of Duke Xing's mansion have returned. Mei Shui said uneasily. She still remembered Madame of Duke Xing's angry look just now, so she did not dare to answer like this. She carefully reminded Qin Yuru. Qin Wanru calmly picked up the tea at hand and took a sip. This meant that the consort selection banquet of Prince Cheng's mansion was over. Madame of Duke Xing knew what happened to Qin Yuru in Prince Cheng's mansion. Back. Qin Yuru did not understand at first. After thinking for a while, she immediately understood the meaning of Mei Shui's words. She asked Mei Shui to go over and explain to Madame of Duke Xing implicitly what happened in Prince Cheng's mansion. She wanted to report to Madame of Duke Xing first because she was afraid that Madame of Duke Xing would be angry if she knew what she had done in Prince Cheng's mansion. Madame of Duke Xing knew nothing about that. Let's go and have a look. At this time, Qin Yuru did not care that she twisted her neck and looked ugly. She immediately stood up and walked out, ignoring Qin Wanru who was still sitting in the room. Mei Shui led the way and Qin Yuru followed her out. Nanny Huang thought about it and was worried, so she wanted to catch up with them. Nanny Huang, please wait. Qin Wanru suddenly said. Nanny Huang stopped and had to stop. Nanny Huang, do you know what happened? Qin Wanru smiled slightly. What happened to the two doctors just now made her think that it was better to kill Nanny Huang. What happened? Nanny Huang suppressed her anxiety and had a bad feeling in her heart. Big sister tried to seduce Prince Cheng in Prince Cheng's mansion before, but Prince Cheng didn't like it. Many young madams present watched the drama. I wonder if Nanny Huang, as big sister's etiquette instructor, knows about it. Qin Wanru said slowly and raised her watery eyes which were as light as glass. Nanny Huang's face turned pale, and her lips trembled twice. She could hardly speak. She reached out to hold the pillar on the side to stabilize her body. She only felt a buzzing sound in her head. She had been teaching young ladies of aristocratic families for many years and had seen many strange things, but she had never seen such a shameless thing. How could an engaged woman dare to hook up with another man? Moreover, this man was Prince Cheng, who had always been unwilling to marry. How shameless and despicable Qin Yuru must be to do such a thing. Nanny Huang, are you wholeheartedly helping big sister now? Nanny Huang, do you think it won't affect you if eldest sister's affair is exposed? Qin Wanru looked at Nanny Huang and said gently. Only her eyes were so clear that Nanny Huang didn't dare to look at them directly. Her expression and bearing were far beyond that of ordinary young ladies of aristocratic families. Second miss, why do you say so? Nanny Huang's lips trembled, and she suppressed her emotions in her heart and said slowly. Nanny Huang, the reason why you are so dedicated to Big Sister is that Big Sister has said something to you? Qin Wanru stood up and looked around the room with her watery eyes. This is Duke Xing's mansion. I heard that the former heir of Duke Xing lost a daughter. However, he left the capital city for about 13 years, but Big Sister should be 15 years old. She said it very casually, as if she just said it. After that, she didn't look at Nanny Huang's suddenly livid face and walked out. Qin Wanru slightly raised the corner of her mouth. She didn't know what Qin Yuru had said to Nanny Huang and to what extent, but she guessed that Qin Yuru had used both the carrot and the stick. The so-called carrot was naturally related to Qin Yuru's so-called family background, or promised some benefits, or said that Qin Yuru was the lineal miss of Duke Xing. When Qin Wanru didn't know what Qin Yuru had said specifically, she naturally mentioned it very vaguely. She guessed that Qin Yuru had lied. First Miss is only 13 years old, isn't she? As expected, Nanny Huang's trembling voice came from behind. Do you believe it, Nanny Huang? Qin Wanru slightly tilted her head and asked with a little coquettishness. Believe it? Nanny Huang didn't know. Although she educated Qin Yuru, she was not familiar with the people around Qin Yuru. Occasionally, she seemed to vaguely hear that Qin Yuru was 15 years old, but later Qin Yuru said that she was only 13 years old, which made her a little confused. What happened in Prince Cheng's mansion today will be spread out soon. Prince Cheng is the nephew of Rui and great elder princess. If Big Sister is really related to the former heir of Duke Xing, there is a gap in seniority between you and Prince Cheng. Qin Wanru pointed out. After finishing her words, she ignored Nanny Huang who was dumbstruck behind her and turned to walk out. Yu Jie followed her closely. What was the relationship between the granddaughter of Rui and great elder princess and the nephew of Rui and great elder princess? If Qin Yuru was really the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing, it was impossible for her to seduce Prince Cheng. They were not in seniority, and they were so close. It was impossible for such a thing to happen. But on the other hand, since Qin Yuru had done this, it meant that Qin Yuru knew clearly in her heart that she had nothing to do with Prince Cheng, so there was such a thing. Nanny Huang moved stiffly to the chair on the side and sat down slowly. After thinking about the matter several times, she finally sorted out some ideas. The so-called origin that Qin Yuru had told her was fake. It was impossible for her to be the abandoned daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing. She was fake. What she did was to use this identity. If this kind of thing was exposed, she would immediately lose her reputation. Not only Qin Yuru, but also Nanny Huang. Although her family had received benefits from Duke Yong's mansion and promised her to make plans for Qin Yuru wholeheartedly, it did not mean that she had to sacrifice her entire family and even her life for it. She was willing to work for Qin Yuru before. On the one hand, it was because of the generous gift from Duke Yong's mansion and some prestige. On the other hand, it was because of the origin that Qin Yuru had told her before. If all this was fake, then it was useless for her to make plans. Thinking about this, Nanny Huang stood up, pulled her clothes, turned around, and walked out decisively. She couldn't stay and suffer with Qin Yuru. Even if she didn't want to be an etiquette instructor in the future, she could go far away. She absolutely didn't want to be a victim in this matter. She had taught Qin Yuru for a period of time. If something really happened, she was afraid that she would use her as a shield. "Miss, where are we going?" Yujie could not bear it anymore and asked. Along the way, Qin Wanru walked very leisurely, as if she just wanted to enjoy the scenery. She stopped from time to time to enjoy the scenery. Along the way, she met a lot of servants of Duke Xing's mansion, and all of them looked at Qin Wanru with unfriendly eyes, which made Yujie more and more uncomfortable. "Just walk around," Qin Wanru said indifferently, as if she did not see the servant girl coming from the opposite side. She looked arrogant. Seeing Qin Wanru coming to her face, she just avoided to the side and did not salute. It could be seen that all the servants of Duke Xing's mansion were very neglectful to her. This kind of neglect could be seen on their faces, and they probably could not bear it anymore. In fact, the servant girl in front of her was quite familiar. She had seen her more than once along the way. Since old madam did not like her, she would not care about the thin blood kinship. The first time she saw this servant girl was in old madam's yard. "Miss, do you want to take a rest for a while?" Yujie looked at the servant girl who avoided to the side of the road and carefully reminded Qin Wanru. "No, I have nothing to do anyway. The scenery in this mansion is good. It would be great if our mansion could have such scenery. This time, I will take the opportunity of big sister living here to enjoy the scenery." Qin Wanru raised her beautiful little face with a smile, looked sideways at the rockery on the side, and praised. The contempt and happiness in her words were not like that of a younger sister who moved in to take care of her elder sister who was injured. He sounded very happy, even gloating over the misfortune of others. The servant girl standing on the side raised the corner of her mouth sarcastically. This servant girl was really ignorant. As old madam said, she was ignorant and greedy. She robbed first Miss Qin's jade bracelet and broke it in the street. She was so narrow-minded that she even looked down on servant girls like them. After a while, she would go to report to old madam. This second Miss Qin not only did not take old madam's words seriously, but also strolled in the garden with the servant girl. "Miss, do you want to go over there and have a look? The yard over there looks very beautiful." Peeping at the expression of the servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion and then looking at her Mrs. leisurely look, Yujie suddenly understood. She immediately agreed with Qin Wanru, reached out and pointed to a yard not far away in front of them and said. The yard looked magnificent at first glance. It was definitely not a place that ordinary people could afford to live. There were rockery at the entrance, a small bridge, and a gurgling stream. "Okay, let's go and have a look." Qin Wanru also seemed to be interested. She lifted the corner of her skirt and was about to walk over. The servant girl of Duke Xing's mansion couldn't stand it anymore. She felt that she was about to explode with anger. Where did this peerless girl come from? How dare she go to first Mrs. Yard? She didn't know whether she had the face to do so. "Miss, that's our first Mrs. Yard. Not everyone can enter it." The servant girl straightened up and said in an enigmatic tone. "Our miss is not an ordinary person. She is invited by your madam of Duke Xing." Yujie seemed to not hear the contempt in the servant girl's words. She raised her face and said arrogantly. "Our madam of Duke Xing doesn't invite just anyone. I wonder which mansion you are from." The servant girl looked her up and down and became more and more disdainful. She really thought that she didn't know how the person in front of her came in and even dared to scare her here. Our miss is from Ningyuan Army General's mansion. Yu Jie said proudly. Oh, it turns out that you are from the mansion of the miss who bumped into our third madam. The servant girl seemed to be suddenly enlightened. She looked Qin Wanru up and down, and then reached out to point and said, that is our first Mrs. Yard. No one can go there casually. Otherwise, she will be severely punished. Miss, please leave. Yu Jie was angry. Don't you know that you should follow the rules of other mansions when you go to other mansions? The servant girl interrupted Yu Jie's words rudely, sneered, and turned to leave. She was going to report to Madame Dowager. This second Miss Qin was untactful, unruly and good for nothing. Madame Dowager sent her here to see if she worked for Madame Dowager sincerely. She sent someone to invite the general of Qin's mansion to discuss the matter of first Miss Qin. Now it seemed that this general was not a good person and deliberately delayed. Chapter 419. First Miss Qin, how could you do such a thing in Prince Cheng's mansion? Madame of Duke Xing was so angry that she banged the table hard and said harshly. Xiao Jia, the second miss of Duke Xing's mansion, was sitting beside her. At this time, she was enjoying a good show. It was she who brought back the previous rumor. She was the daughter of a concubine in Duke Xing's mansion, but she had never been favored. Although she carefully flattered Madame of Duke Xing, she was even inferior to Madame of Duke Xing's principal maid. She had always been bossed around. It was rare to see someone worse than her, so she naturally saw a good show. Madame of Duke Xing, this is really a misunderstanding. I don't know why this happened, but this is really a misunderstanding. I also entered the garden by mistake. Qin Yuru explained in a panic. Entered by mistake. First Miss Qin, do you really think everyone is a fool? Madame of Duke Xing was really angry. She was not old Madame of Duke Yong, who would naturally beautify Qin Yuru's behavior. Thinking that her plan was flawed because of Qin Yuru, she was so angry that she wanted to slap Qin Yuru twice. How could there be such a shameless woman? Did she know that she had been engaged? How could she have the face to seduce Prince Cheng? Moreover, she had succeeded in recognizing her ancestor. She was not only related to Prince Cheng by blood, but also in the wrong generation. Did she really not know what she was doing? Madam, this is really an accident. I just wanted to walk casually at that time. I didn't expect to meet Prince Cheng, and I don't know when I lost my earring. Qin Yuru knew that she should grit her teeth at this time, so she refused to admit it. Anyway, she insisted on saying so. Could others force her to admit it? Madam, don't you know what kind of person I am? How could I make such a mess at this time? Moreover, my parents know the marriage between my cousin and me. Qin Yuru wiped her tears. She had thought of a reason before, and it was just right to use it to defend herself. Jia, you leave first. Madame of Duke Xing stared at her for a while, and then waved her hand with a cold face and said. Yes, mother. Xiao Jia, stood up obediently and left the courtyard with her maid. However, she stopped at the gate of the courtyard and turned to the back of the courtyard with her maid. Although Qin Yuru and Madame of Duke Xing didn't say anything, it made her feel suspicious. There seemed to be a lot of things in it. It was said that first Miss Qin, who was liked by Madame Dowager, seemed to be familiar with Madame Dowager. Why was Madame Dowager so angry? The first Miss Qin and the Ningyuan Army General's mansion behind her were shameful, which had nothing to do with their mansion. However, Madame seemed to have been ruined by the first Miss Qin. Could there be some kind of secret here? Where are you going, second Miss? Xiao Jia had only taken a few steps when she suddenly heard a cold voice behind her. Hearing this familiar voice, Xiao Jia couldn't help shivering. It was Nanny Sheng's voice. She hurriedly turned around with a smile and said, Nanny Sheng, I'm just taking a walk. That doesn't seem to be the direction of second Mrs. Courtyard, does it? Nanny Sheng looked ahead and said coldly. It seems that I really went the wrong way. I was thinking about the first Miss Qin just now, so I went the wrong way. Xiao Jia smiled dryly and raised her head, as if she had just found it. Second miss, you'd better go back first. It will be bad if someone misunderstands you. Nanny Sheng looked at her unmoved, which made the smile on her face stiffen. Yes, yes. I'll go back right away. Xiao Jia turned around with a smile and didn't dare not to turn back to the original way. Nanny Sheng was a trusted old maid of Madame of Duke Xing and Duke Xing's wet nurse. Because of their different identities, Xiao Jia didn't dare to disobey her. Although she felt that there must be something fishy between Qin Yuru and Madame of Duke Xing, she didn't dare to stay and eavesdrop. She could only pretend to rush back. Seeing Xiao Jia leave, Nanny Sheng turned back to the room and stood behind Madame of Duke Xing. In the room, Qin Yuru told Madame of Duke Yong's mansion what she had said before. Of course, she tried her best to defend herself, saying that she really didn't know it, so she ran into this matter. Looking at her serious, sad and regretful look, Madame of Duke Xing became dubious. She had never trusted the daughter of a concubine of Duke Xing. That was why Nanny Sheng went to watch her leave. Qin Yuru's words seemed to be sincere, so she couldn't tell whether it was true or not. Could it be that Xiao Jia exaggerated again? It was not that Xiao Jia had never done this kind of thing, and she had done it several times. Madam, I am really wronged. I have made it clear in my maternal grandmother's house. My maternal grandmother, aunt and cousin all think I am wronged. I also told them what you asked second miss to say. Because of this, my maternal grandmother asked me to come to Duke Xing's mansion early. She said that she wanted to use this matter to wash away the previous misunderstanding. It was originally a misunderstanding. With the accident of running into the carriage, it will definitely be washed away. While wiping her tears, Qin Yuru secretly observed Madame of Duke Xing's face. Seeing that although Madame of Duke Yong's mansion still looked gloomy, she didn't look as angry as before. She was overjoyed and said more and more smoothly, as if all the people of Duke Yong's mansion agreed with her. Your cousin also thinks it is a misunderstanding? Madame of Duke Xing's eyes fell on Qin Yuru and asked. It seemed that she thought it was true, but she always felt that something was a little strange. However, she couldn't figure out what was strange at the moment. Yes, cousin also comforted me and said that it would be fine after a period of time. It is not true after all. Qin Yuru nodded and said. Madame of Duke Xing fell silent. Qin Yuru's accident of running into the carriage was indeed very hasty. However, according to her explanation, it seemed to be reasonable. Before the thing in Prince Cheng's mansion was completely spread out, the accident of running into the carriage with her third sister-in-law had been spread out. Moreover, she was injured because of rescuing her third sister-in-law. With this incident as the foundation, the possibility of the thing in Prince Cheng's mansion being a misunderstanding was very high. After all, a kind-hearted girl was unlikely to do such a shameless thing. Thinking in this way, it seemed to be not in conflict with her own matter. Seeing that Madame of Duke Xing was silent, Qin Yuru said anxiously, Madam, if you don't believe me, you can send someone to ask my maternal grandmother about it and ask whether they really agree with me at that time. Her maternal grandmother had always loved her. Even if Madame of Duke Xing sent someone to ask, it didn't matter. Qin Yuru's words were extremely confident. As for Di Yan, when her identity here was confirmed, would he really do anything to her? How's your neck? Hearing what she said, Madame of Duke Xing's expression softened. My neck is fine. The doctor said it will be better soon. I just need to have a good rest. Seeing that Madame of Duke Xing had stopped questioning her, Qin Yuru immediately said cleverly. She didn't believe in the doctor before, with a bit of rudeness to make trouble. At this time, in front of Madame of Duke Xing, she naturally didn't dare to say so. Will it be better tomorrow? Madame of Duke Xing frowned and said. As long as the hidden danger of Qin Wanru's matter was not eliminated, she couldn't calm down. Since Qin Yuru had entered Duke Xing's mansion, this matter could not be delayed any longer. It may be better tomorrow. Qin Yuru didn't dare to guarantee. The doctor only said that it would be better after a good sleep tomorrow. After that, she needed to have a good rest for a period of time. However, he didn't say that it would be better tomorrow. Let's not delay it. Let's do it tomorrow. Tomorrow, invite a few elders to come over. There is no need to hold a big banquet. After you get better, hold a big banquet. Madam of Duke Xing said. Speed was of the essence in war. Since this matter had already happened, the best way was to make use of this matter to directly acknowledge Qin Yuru. Thank you, madam. Qin Yuru was overjoyed. She twisted her neck and bowed to Madam of Duke Xing. She also felt relieved. From now on, she was the Miss of Duke Xing's mansion and the biological granddaughter of Rui, and great elder princess. In the future, no one dared to treat her badly. Old Madam will recognize you as her adopted granddaughter. Madam of Duke Xing didn't ask her to get up, but said slowly. Qin Yuru raised her head suddenly, looked at Madam of Duke Xing in surprise, and said hurriedly, didn't you say, the former heir of Duke Xing's? She didn't know how to say it for a moment, and the sweat on her forehead involuntarily broke out. Of course, biological granddaughter and adopted granddaughter were different. If she was just a adopted granddaughter, there was no difference between her and Qi Rongji's status. Although Qi Rongji had become the adopted daughter of Madam of Duke Xing, which made her very envious, she could obviously get more. Why did she want to be like Qi Rongji? However, the previous things were handled by Madame D. Qin Yuru didn't know whether Madam of Duke Xing really knew something or had any agreement with Madame D before, so she didn't know what to say for a moment. Rui and great elder princess won't recognize you. Madam of Duke Xing sneered and said. But you and old madam can recognize me. Qin Yuru said eagerly. At this time, she just felt that it was much better to be adopted than adopted, so she subconsciously fought for her rights. This will be very troublesome and lead to a series of problems. I will recognize you as my adopted granddaughter on the surface, but privately spread the rumor that you are your adopted granddaughter. If Rui and great elder princess asks, I can only say that you are not. Madam of Duke Xing said calmly. This was what she had discussed with old madam. Rui and great elder princess would not intervene if she only recognized a adopted granddaughter. However, if she said that she was the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing, Rui and great elder princess would definitely intervene. At that time, things would deviate from the direction she had planned. She would spread the news that Qin Yuru was the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing. But if Rui and great elder princess came to ask, she would definitely refuse to admit it. It was a mixture of truth and falsehood, which would make Rui and great elder princess confused and feel that Qin Yuru was really her biological granddaughter. In that case, some things would be much easier to handle. Duke Xing's mansion's plan was never just Ning Yuan army general's mansion. They were even more unwilling to be stepped on by an impostor. If they refused to admit that they were biological relatives, but behaved like they were, Duke Xing's mansion would be able to attack and defend at will. Chapter 420. Madam, isn't it too urgent? Qin Yuru didn't stay for a long time. After she left, Nanny Sheng asked anxiously. Yes, but if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, I'm afraid there won't be another chance in the future. Madam of Duke Xing gritted her teeth and said. If she had known that Qin Yuru got into this kind of trouble again, she would definitely think about it, but now it was too late. Should we tell Marquis about it? Nanny Sheng frowned and said, it's so urgent. We should at least tell Marquis about it, right? Don't tell him. It's useless to tell him, and it will make him say something. Now that things have come to this, and old madam also thinks so, let's not wait. Madam of Duke Xing refused decisively. If they waited, there might be changes. She had planned for a period of time, and finally Madame D and Qin Yuru took the initiative to pretend to be Qin Yuru's parents. If she missed Qin Yuru, where could she find another one who took the initiative and set up such a good background? Although there was a difference between initiative and passivity, it was related to the problem of who would bear the responsibility after the incident. Madame of Duke Xing had always been cautious, so how could she put herself on the opposite side of this matter above board? You're going to recognize him tomorrow? Nanny Xing hesitated and pointed in a direction, which was the direction of old Madame's courtyard. Tomorrow. Madame of Duke Xing nodded and said, find a few servant girls and old maids who are good at massaging later. Today, they will take turns to massage first Miss Qin. You must make her hair straighten tomorrow. Otherwise, she will look ugly. Not only was it ugly, but it would also make people feel that it was too urgent and seemed to be covering up something. Madame of Duke Xing certainly wouldn't let people have such a guess. A niece who pretended to be Qin Yuru would benefit her more than just replacing a position. The rest depended on Qin Yuru's performance. With Qin Yuru and without Qin Yuru, things would be very different in the future. Her daughter secretly came back to the capital city and specially met Qin Yuru, just to confirm it again. Madam, I'm afraid it's a little difficult. Think about it, even if you have a stiff neck, you can't get better in a short time. What's more, first Miss Qin's current situation is much more serious than a stiff neck. Nanny Xing felt it was very difficult, so she withdrew her hand and shook her head. Madame of Duke Xing thought for a moment, and her face was a little gloomy. Is there no other way? Can't I get a quick one with a stiff neck? Nanny Xing frowned at first. After thinking for a while, her eyes suddenly lit up. She immediately said eagerly, Madam, there is a way, but it's a little harmful to the body. What do you mean? Madame of Duke Xing's face lit up. Didn't Madame Dowager suffer from a stiff neck before? Duke invited an old maid to massage Madame Dowager. I also wanted to learn a little at that time, so I made friends with the old maid in private. The old maid didn't hide anything from me and taught me a few tricks. When we were chatting, she said that there is a way to make a stiff neck recover quickly, or to make it look better, which is acupuncture. Nanny Xing said. This thing was really mentioned by chance. Nanny Xing just asked at that time, and the old maid also said casually. Stiff neck was not a big deal, but sometimes it was not very convenient. If she had to attend some necessary occasions, it would be a little embarrassing if she had a stiff neck at that time. However, this kind of acupuncture could not cure the root cause. It could only look normal, but in fact, the neck was still stiff. It would hurt if she moved it, but it was not crooked. Moreover, the degree of the stiff neck was even more serious. After all, it was already a straight process from a crooked stiff neck to a straight stiff neck. Straightening the stiff neck would definitely hurt the tendons of the neck. Qin Yuru had hurt the tendons. Straightening the stiff neck would be more serious than straightening the stiff neck. She might not be able to move her neck for a period of time. After Nanny Xing finished talking about this in detail, Madame of Duke Xing immediately nodded and said, Is the old maid still there? Let her do acupuncture for Qin Yuru. She didn't care about Qin Yuru's health. Yes, I will secretly invite her to come here later, but, even if the neck can't be seen, she may not look very good. Nanny Xing was a little hesitant. This method was a little harmful. The injured would be more injured, and her face would definitely look bad. It doesn't matter. As long as Qin Yuru comes out tomorrow and finishes the business, she can rest for a long time. As for treating the symptoms but not the root cause, she originally had a car accident, so it is normal for her to look bad. Madame of Duke Xing sneered and said sarcastically. She has made so many things and needs me to help her bring up the rear. She has to show some sincerity. Yes, I will arrange it now. Nanny Xing felt that Madame of Duke Xing was reasonable, so she immediately responded. Nanny Xing also looked down on this first Miss Qin, who wanted to play up to the rich and powerful. Wait a minute. You go to inform Duke Yong's mansion later. Tell them that old madam will recognize Qin Yuru as her adopted granddaughter tomorrow and invite them to attend the ceremony. Yes, I know. What about Qin's mansion? Old madam will invite and discuss the affairs of Qin's mansion. It has nothing to do with us. Madam of Duke Xing raised the corner of her mouth sarcastically. She would not rush to find trouble. Pulling strings and building bridges had nothing to do with her. Even if something really happened, it had nothing to do with her. Qin Wanru did not know that old madam of Duke Xing's mansion invited Qin Huayong. What she knew was that she had successfully annoyed old madam, and old madam would probably hate her very much now. And this was originally her goal. Even if her real identity was indeed related to Duke Xing's mansion, she was not willing to live in Duke Xing's mansion now. Old madam's hate was a crucial part. The more old madam hated her, the more reasons she would have to leave Duke Xing's mansion. After her age became her weakness, she wanted to find a fair reason to leave Duke Xing's mansion. But now she was sitting in a pavilion with interest, looking at Qi Rongji in front of her with gentle eyes. Compared with her, Qi Rongji looked flustered and exasperated. It could be seen that Qi Rongji was very anxious and angry. Just now when she was walking casually, Qi Rongji came out from behind a rockery and stopped her. Now they were sitting in the pavilion behind the rockery. This place seemed to be secluded. On one side was a rockery, and on the other side was a wall. They could hear people passing by outside, but people outside could not see them. Qi Rongji found a good place. What does Qin Yuru mean? Qi Rongji was perturbed and asked in a low voice with a pale face. She did not want people passing by outside to hear their conversation. Since she got the news that Qin Yuru entered the mansion, she had been perturbed, angry and hateful. She wants to become the lineal miss of Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Wanru smiled slightly. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, which made her eyes look deep and clear, beautiful and enchanting. If it was in the past, Qi Rongji would be jealous and hateful when she saw Qin Wanru like this. But today her focus was not on Qin Wanru, so she naturally did not notice Qin Wanru's natural beauty. She was now wholeheartedly thinking about Qin Yuru. Thinking of Qin Yuru would endanger her position. Why does she become a lineal miss? Does she really think she is the daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing? Qi Rongji said restlessly. In the conversation between Qin Wanru and her before, this meaning had been faintly revealed. Why not? Anyway, you don't know, I don't know, and others don't know. Qin Wanru said softly with a smile. She looked leisurely as if this matter had nothing to do with her. Don't know. Qin Yuru really thinks she can do whatever she wants. Qi Rongji gritted her teeth. How could she let Qin Yuru do what she wanted? Moreover, she did not want Qin Yuru to share her favor. Of course, it was not only favor, but also all the attention of old madam and madam of Duke Xing's mansion. No, as long as she was here, Qin Yuru must not enter Duke Xing's mansion. Jiangzhou is too far, and it is too late. Old madam asked me to go back and ask my father to come. It should be to discuss the matter of recognizing big sister. I guess there may be news tomorrow. Qin Wanru lowered her head and pulled the corner of her clothes, with a faint smile on her lips. What, so soon? Qi Rongji could not sit still anymore. She suddenly stood up and walked around in the pavilion for a few times. She originally thought it would take some time, but after hearing Qin Wanru's words, she also thought it would happen tomorrow. No, she must stop it. But she had not convinced her big brother. Her big brother would not give her the evidence in his hands. What should she do? What should she do? Qi Rongji was so anxious that her forehead was immediately covered with sweat. First, Miss Qi, why are you in such a hurry? Sit down and have some tea. You and big sister will be sisters in the future. You and big sister must have done a lot of blind dates when you were in Jiangzhou. Qin Wanru pulled the corner of her clothes and stood up, looking very leisurely and ready to leave. This matter had nothing to do with her, so she naturally did not need to be anxious. Blind date with Qin Yuru and her sister. She doesn't deserve it. Qi Rongji sneered. She now hated Qin Yuru very much, only thinking that Qin Yuru came to rob her of her wealth. Why not? Big sister has been preparing for this for a long time. Now no one can prove that she is not. Qin Wanru said meaningfully. Who said there isn't? There is. Qi Rongji said angrily. There is? But you can't get it. Qin Wanru smiled, and her expression became more and more elegant. She rolled her watery eyes and said with some interest, I don't know if first Miss Qi can defeat Big Sister next. In the past in Jiangzhou, first Miss Qi has always been at a disadvantage in the hands of Big Sister. When she was in Jiangzhou, Qin Yuru could be said to be a goddess. Not only was her status at the top in Jiangzhou, but even Qi Tianyu had to give in to her again and again. If Qi Rongji fought with her, Qi Tianyu always told Qi Rongji not to fight with Qin Yuru. That was why Qi Rongji vented her anger on Qin Wanru. Thinking of this, Qi Rongji could not bear it anymore, feeling only the burning fire in her heart uncomfortable. I will definitely get it, she said with an angry face. Definitely get it? Are you going to steal it? Qin Wanru looked up in surprise, seemingly very surprised. Chapter 421. Qi Rongji left in a hurry, even more than Qin Wanru. Looking at Qi Rongji who couldn't wait, Qin Wanru smiled slightly and stood still, watching Qi Rongji's hurried figure. She didn't know what kind of evidence Qi Tianyu had, but he must have it. Qi Tianyu was very cautious, and Qi Baiyu had never had a chance to steal the original letter from him. He didn't trust Qi Baiyu, but he trusted his sister. If there was anyone else who could get the evidence from Qi Tianyu, it could only be Qi Rongji. Qi Rongji must have gone to find Qi Tianyu. That would be the best. It would be the best if she could get it, but if she couldn't, she had a countermeasure. She turned around and walked back slowly. When she came to the yard, she found Qin Yuru was already there. An old maid stood behind Qin Yuru, who was kneading her crooked and stiff neck. Hearing the footsteps, she opened her eyes and saw it was Qin Wanru. Then she closed her eyes without a sound, as if she didn't see Qin Wanru come in. Qin Wanru didn't care and looked at the old maid behind her. She was very skilled, but no matter how skilled she was, her crooked neck couldn't be cured in a short time. But her eyes fell on a small half-opened bag behind the old maid, and her eyes unconsciously became gloomy. Acupuncture. Following her eyes, Yujie's eyes also fell on a few long needles in the bag, and her face changed slightly. She also understood that the old maid not only needed her neck, but also used acupuncture. Both Qin Wanru and Yujie knew that acupuncture would not work at this time, and it would even make it more difficult for her to recover later. Madame of Duke Xing was anxious. Big sister, if there is nothing else, I will go to have a rest. Knowing that she was not needed here, Qin Wanru said with indifferent eyes, and her words were not intimate. Go. Qin Yuru didn't open her eyes and snorted. After tomorrow, she and Qin Wanru would be really different. She was not in the mood to pretend to be a sister with Qin Wanru. Qin Wanru left and had a rest in the wing room where she lived temporarily, while Yujie was sent to pick a few plum blossoms. On the way here, there were many plum trees in Duke Xing's mansion. It was reasonable to ask Yujie to go out with such an excuse. After all, Qin Wanru was the miss of the master, so it was very inconvenient for her to go in and out, and there were also many people watching her. Yujie was just a servant girl who picked a few suitable flowers, but it was very convenient for her. Qin Huayong should be invited by old madam at this time. Qin Wanru did not ask Yujie to know clearly what they were talking about, but asked Yujie to know a little about Qin Huayong's schedule. Take Yuru as your granddaughter? Qin Huayong put down the teacup in his hand, frowned slightly, and asked in confusion, why did old madam take a fancy to Yuru? He was invited by old madam just now. Your daughter and I hit it off at first sight, and I like a child like her very much. I heard that her mother is quite ill, so she can be raised in Duke Xing's mansion in the future. I will naturally love her as my own granddaughter." Old Madam smiled, and her eyes were gentle, which was completely different from when she saw Qin Wanru before. Nanny Yu sighed helplessly on the side. When she heard that the second Miss Qin saved her, Old Madam still had a good impression of her. Of course, this kind of good impression could not be compared with the first Miss Qin. But later, news came one after another saying that the second Miss Qin seemed to be not simple. In addition, Old Madam just asked her to invite Ning Yuan Army General, but she actually agreed on the surface but disobeyed on the surface, which annoyed Old Madam. Last time when she saw the second Miss, she was obviously not like this. Why did she become so annoying now? At that time, the young woman who was calm, and able to handle heavy things with ease used to be her backbone. Why was she so ignorant now and did not take Old Madam seriously? Nanny Yu did not understand, but she did not dare to speak carelessly. She said a few good words for the second Miss Qin before, but Old Madam, who had never reprimanded her, was furious and even said that if she said such words again, the relationship of master and servant for many years would be over. So Nanny Yu did not dare to say anything more. "Old Madam, do you really like Yuru?" Qin Huayong seemed to be moved by Old Madam's words just now, and asked after thinking for a while. "Yes, I do like the first Mississippi," Old Madam smiled kindly. Hearing Old Madam's words and seeing that Old Madam seemed to really like Qin Huayong thought a little longer this time, but he still nodded. "Then I will have to trouble Old Madam in the future." "Don't mention it. Yuru will be my granddaughter in the future, and it is reasonable for me to care more about my granddaughter." Old Madam also breathed a sigh of relief. She did not expect that her goal would be achieved so easily. Immediately, her smile became more and more kind, as if Qin Yuru was really her biological granddaughter. Yuru's neck was slightly injured, and she needs to recuperate for a period of time. Tomorrow, we will simply recognize her and ask several elders to be witnesses. After that, she will be allowed to recuperate in Duke Xing's mansion. The mansion will invite imperial physicians to treat her, and the education will also specially invite suitable nannies to teach her. Old Madam had already made arrangements in her mind. Seeing that Qin Huayong agreed, she immediately told him what would happen next. As for the fact that Old Madam thought that Qin Yuru was her biological granddaughter, Old Madam thought that there was no need to tell Qin Huayong. Madam of Duke Xing told her the pros and cons of formally recognizing Qin Yuru. The pros outweighed the cons, and it was better not to tell the truth. Anyway, she would raise her as her biological granddaughter in the future. Except for the title of her biological granddaughter, she could give her anything else. It was not a grievance. "Old Madam, is it too hasty?" Qin Huayong asked. "If it's faster, it will be more justifiable for her to live here, and it will also be good for her injury." Old Madam guided him patiently. Her words repeatedly indicated that Qin Yuru could only get greater benefits if she had a relationship with Duke Xing's mansion. Qin Huayong was silent, and it was obvious that he was hesitant. Old Madam picked up the tea at hand and took a sip unhurriedly. She did not believe that Qin Huayong would give up such a good opportunity. She was the daughter of lineal descent of Ning Yuan Army General's mansion and the granddaughter of Duke Xing's mansion. The meaning of this was more than a simple change of mansion. In this case, everything is at Old Madam's command. After a moment of silence, Qin Huayong understood, raised his eyes, and said decisively. "Okay, then it's settled. From now on, our two families will be considered as one family. If you have any difficulties, you can directly come to us." Old Madam was very satisfied with Qin Huayong's attitude. Her smile became more and more amiable, and there was some kindness in her words, which made people have a good impression. Qin Huayong understood what she meant. Not only Qin Yuru became the daughter of Duke Xing's mansion, but also he would get many benefits. "Thank you, Old Madam." Qin Huayong was overjoyed. He stood up and bowed to old madam respectfully. Ning Yuan Army General, you are too polite. Old madam nodded with a smile. Since the matter had been settled, Qin Huayong could not stay here any longer. He stood up and said goodbye. He promised to come to watch the ceremony tomorrow. Coming out of old madam's courtyard, Qin Huayong followed an old maid to go out, but he met Madam of Duke Xing on the way. Ning Yuan Army General. Madam of Duke Xing seemed to be surprised to see Qin Huayong, but she reacted quickly. She immediately showed a gentle smile and stood at the intersection. Madam of Duke Xing. Since he met Madam of Duke Xing, Qin Huayong naturally stopped. Can I ask the general what second miss likes? Madam of Duke Xing asked with a smile. Wanru. Qin Huayong looked at Madam of Duke Xing in confusion. Just now old madam said that she likes Yuru. What does this have to do with Wanru? It has nothing to do with second miss, but tomorrow I will prepare a gift for second miss, so I want to know some of second miss preferences. I wonder if Ning Yuan Army General can tell me some of second miss preferences. Madam of Duke Xing said gently. Hearing Madam of Duke Xing's words, Qin Huayong was embarrassed to refuse again. He immediately told her some of Qin Wanru's preferences that he knew. Madam of Duke Xing nodded repeatedly while listening. After they stood on the roadside and talked for a while, Qin Huayong left. Have you remembered all of them? Looking at Qin Huayong's figure leaving in a hurry, Madam of Duke Xing said slowly in a low voice. Don't worry, madam. I have almost memorized all of them. Nanny Xing stepped forward and said. She had been carefully remembering what Ning Yuan Army General said just now. After going back, sort them out. Madam of Duke Xing nodded, turned around and went back. She had come to stop Qin Huayong on purpose. During the conversation just now, she got a lot of information. Madam, I will write them down later, but I am afraid that they may not be used tomorrow. Nanny Xing followed her and turned in a direction, lowered her voice and said carefully. She was the henchman of Madam of Duke Xing, so she certainly knew the meaning of Madam's behavior just now. In Nanny Xing's opinion, in fact, there was no need to go through so much trouble. Madam was still too cautious. Prepare them first. If there is any change, we can use them first. Even if Qin Wanru is cunning, she will not think of this kind of thing. Ru also thinks so. Those two people were prepared by Ru early. Madam of Duke Xing said in a low voice. Although her daughter was young, she was born to be extraordinary and considerate. Since she asked her to be careful, she would listen to her and be prepared. Since Qin Wanru was really Shi Qinghua's daughter, she must not let her live. Even if those two people could not be used tomorrow, they would still be used in the future. Hearing that it was the first miss's idea, Nanny Xing did not dare to say anything more. Although the first miss was young, she had always been smart. Since she said so, it naturally made sense. It was destined to be a difficult night to fall asleep. Qin Yuru moaned for half the night, and from time to time, Qin Yuru's scream could be heard. It should be the effect of acupuncture. Qin Wanru also slept uncomfortably because of her. It was unknown when Qin Yuru's voice stopped, and Qin Wanru also fell asleep like a dream. Tomorrow, she was waiting for tomorrow. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.